Morning. All right, welcome. Tonight we'd like to call to order the David Douglas Budget Committee meeting on May 4th, 2026. Can we start with Superintendent Richardson's opening remarks?
Great, thank you, Heather. Just real quick, welcome, thank you. We truly appreciate all of your time, energy, and expertise. I want to begin by expressing my appreciation to our Budget Committee, both our board members and our appointed community members. I'd also like to thank our administrative team and staff and extend a deep gratitude to our families and community members who partner with us every day to best serve our students. I'm especially grateful to all of you for keeping students at the center of this work. We know that more than 80% of our budget supports people who serve our students in our community. As we discuss the big numbers throughout this process, as I always ask, I hope we keep it grounded that we're talking about people behind all of these numbers and real systems that are vital to our kids and impact students every day. And again, this is just a quick welcome and thank you. So thank you in advance for your time, your thoughtfulness, and work ahead. And I'll be back in a little bit with my budget message.
Thank you. All right, next on the agenda, we have approval of the May 5th, 2025 Budget Committee meeting minutes.
Ender, second.
Thank you. Okay, so board members do not vote in this, just the Budget Committee members. So we'll take, everybody votes? Okay. Do you need a roll call vote? Do you need individuals? Okay. Okay, let's start. Jose, we'll start with you.
Gomer Jordan, aye.
Carrie Fry, aye. Joy Schomer, aye.
Stevenson, aye.
Ewald, aye.
Jordan, aye.
Katrina Whittle, aye.
Epstein, aye.
Pekarsky, aye.
Ender, aye.
Zion, aye.
And Franklin, aye. All right, next on the agenda, we need to hold an election for the presiding officer for 26-27 Budget Committee. So I'm going to open for nominations.
I nominate Craig Fry.
Is there any other nominations? Okay, well then we'll close nominations and start again with Jose. We'll start with you. Vote. The vote is for Carrie Fry for presiding officer.
Do you accept though?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
Oh, I guess I have to accept. Yes, I'll accept.
Okay, I vote for Carrie.
I'll vote for myself.
Okay, vote for Carrie.
Vote for Carrie.
Carrie Fry.
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 I might need some guidance, Christopher. Yeah, exactly. Thanks, everybody. All right. So I think the first thing we need to do is set a duration for tonight's meeting. I know generally in the past we've worked to end by 9:30. I would suggest something around that time unless anybody has another timeline they'd like to propose.
I move for 9:30.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Do I need to do the same vote? All right, go ahead.
Gomer Jordan, aye.
Franklin, aye.
Aye.
Stevenson, aye.
Jordan, I.
Whittle, I.
Epstein, I.
Aye.
I.
Ender, I.
Aye.
Fry, aye. All right. The next item on the agenda is the budget message from our superintendent, Ken Richardson.
Thank you. All right, thank you once again and welcome. Before I begin my formal budget message, I want to take a moment to recognize our incredible staff across DDSD and all they do each day to serve our students. I share this with a deep sense of pride in the work we do as a district and a commitment to keeping our focus on meaningful impact we have on our community. There is so much to celebrate even as we continue to look for ways to grow and improve. That said, the reason I wanted to start with that is my budget message once again includes some difficult information. My goal is not to focus on negative, but to honestly share the real challenges we are facing and will continue to face related to education funding if something doesn't change. Ultimately, many of you have already reviewed this page by page. We'll be going through it tonight. You will see this budget is a reduction budget. We have made reductions, and it's a deficit spending budget. We are intentionally trying to do a glide format rather than a cliff, but it is a deficit-based budget, and I want to make sure that we're all clear about that. Even amid uncertainty and ongoing budget deficits, I remain optimistic about our work to educate and support our students. I'm confident that whatever challenges lie ahead, we will come together to stay focused on what matters most and find solutions. And now my formal budget message. I present to you the recommended operating budget for the David Douglas School District for the fiscal year beginning July 1, 2026 and ending in June 30, 2027. As required by Oregon budget law, the proposed budget is balanced between total resources and requirements. We based our 26-27 budget on a proposed budget allocating $11.36 billion to the state school fund budget. This message accompanying documents are presented in compliance with revised statute chapters 294, ORS 294.403, 294.408, and 294.426. The legislature passed an $11.36 billion state school fund, a significant increase from the prior biennium's $10.2 billion. This increase comes after the state reviewed the methodology used for developing the current service level for the state school fund. The state recognized that some costs used for initial projections did not represent the school district's current service level funding. Additional legislative discussions included increasing special education funding. However, due to lack of resources, the state did not increase the high-cost disability grant. Currently, special education is underfunded. The high-cost disability grant has been $55 million since 2020-21. Interestingly, the amount of the total expenditures for high-cost students in 05-06 was about $55 million, demonstrating the inadequacy of funding. Statewide districts submitted approximately $200 million in eligible expenditures in 24-25 for the $55 million in funds. Our district submitted an estimated of $4.5 million in eligible expenditures for 25-26 and will be reimbursed just under $1 million, or about 22%. The state school fund formula provides a cap on special education at 11% of the average daily membership, but the state is seeing these special education average daily membership rates come in around 15%. While we anticipate additional revenues for 25-26 due to pending legislative changes and funding for special educations, those did not come to fruition. The district continues to implement its strategic plan and equity plan and utilize these as guiding principles while we reduced our budget due to diminishing resources. Our district's strategic plan focuses on 4 guiding principles of ensuring safety and wellness, cultivating connections and relationships, centering on equity and innovation, and the strategic plan has 4 focus areas of diversity, equity and inclusion, communication and family, community engagement, health and well-being, highly effective curriculum with instruction focused on equity and empowerment. The district will roll out a new strategic plan with similar goals in the upcoming school year. We bring this budget to you as part of our compliance and following local budget law. The state has seen significant decline in enrollment and average daily membership weighted ADMW for students. The 2021 state school fund was based on 708,000. I'm just going to round their team if that's okay. The 2026 state school fund estimate is based on 663,000 ADMW, a decline from the prior year. Because the number of students attending has declined, the amount of the state funding per ADMW has increased, but has still not kept up with inflation or allowed for investments. The state forecast assumed a local revenue increase of 3% statewide. The amount has fluctuated for our district's tax revenue from around 0.25% to about 3.5% over about the last decade. The percentage of the state's budget funding K-12 has decreased over the past 20 years. Additional funding through the Student Success Act, SSA, passed during the 2019 legislative session, is supported by corporate activity tax. The district initial allocation for student investment account for 25-26 was about $9.6 million, was about the same amount as we received in 24-25. This budget anticipates an increase in SIA funding to about $10.2 million with some additional carryover from 25-26. We strive to maintain investments in key areas of equity, academics, and wellness while realizing we would need to make some reductions in order to balance our budget. Our SIA plan was based on community engagement and input and can be found on the district website under our district integrated plan. The district maintained its investments in early childhood education, including expanding preschool programs to all our elementary schools, and plans to add 2 more preschools next year, one at West Palhurst Elementary and another at Lincoln Park Elementary School. The district has provided and plans to maintain full-day kindergarten as well as music and physical education programs throughout the K-12 system. The district plans to offer a full complement of athletic and co-curricular activities as well as advanced placement and college courses. In developing this budget, we strive to keep our commitment of providing educational opportunities that will allow students to learn, grow, and thrive. However, due to the enrollment decline and in turn revenue decline, there simply is not adequate funding to fund every need without the student investment account and other grant funds. Many programs and services would have been eliminated or reduced without them. In our elementary and middle school athletic programs, our elementary and middle school athletic programs are supported through the student investment account, which gives us the opportunity to provide them for free, but does limit the number of students participating. Our district has experienced a decrease in students over the past 10 years, with enrollment flattening in the 23-24 and 24-25 school years. The district started to see an increase in enrollment and ADMW in 24 and 25, but we are projecting a decline in enrollment for the 26-27 school year. There's a table below. I'm going to read down through the bottom of this page, and then you could look at the table while I'm reading if you'd like. Looking at our October enrollments from October 16th to the present, our enrollment has declined about 2,285 students. We saw an increase for this past year and are planning a decline for next year. Our district also is continuing to see declining birth rates, which suggests that future years will also see a decline in enrollment. Our ADMW, average daily membership weighted, has also been affected by a decline in poverty rating. The 26-27 poverty ADMW is anticipated to stay flat. The district's 26-27 proposed budget of the district's 26-27 proposed budget is $350,508,435, with the general fund making up $158,187,177. We are grateful to our community for passing our measure for general obligation bond of just over $140 million, which included adding a new career technical education center to the high school campus and fund needed deferred maintenance. The Career Technical Education Center opened in January of this year, and we appreciate the community's fundraising support in that endeavor. The general fund budget attempts to take reductions in areas without compromising our operations such as maintenance and transportation while taking into account prioritized programs. The budget reallocates funding into some areas which represent additions while taking reductions in other areas. We are continually patching services together with multiple funds. The summary below notes budget adjustments for the upcoming fiscal year. This list is not exhaustive of all changes in the budget, which are denoted on the summary pages of each program. At the time of preparation of this budget, the district did not have all the information on grants, and we may see additional reductions due to reduction in grant allocations. The budget does contain increases for the areas including: first, multiple programs, increases in property and liability insurance. Program 2542, care and upkeep of buildings, increases for utilities that compromise not only the cost increases, but also additional usage as we open the Career and Technical Education Center, and we add cooling to additional buildings. Programs 2510, direction of business, additional 0.15 FTE administrator, and programs 22520 fiscal service, additional of 0.85 FTE funded by capital projects, which, as the projects are finishing, will not have continued funding. Here are some general fund budget reductions. In program 1111, elementary programs, reductions of 8 FTE licensed teacher. Program 1111, elementary programs, reduction of 0.74 classified FTE. Program 1121, middle school programs, reduction of 6 FTE licensed teacher. Program 1131, high school programs, reduction of 3.5 FTE licensed teacher. Program 1131, high school programs, reduction of 24,400 in middle college tuition. Program 1111, elementary programs, and Program 1121, middle school programs, and 1131, high school programs, reduction of funds for the science textbook adoption that was completed in 25-26. Program 1286, online academy, reduction of 0.75 FTE instructional assistant. Program 1291, English as a second language, reduction of 1.8 FTE licensed teacher. Program 2120, guidance services, reduction of 1 FTE licensed staff at the high school and 9 FTE licensed staff at elementary schools. This is a little confusing, but the reduction is actually school behavior specialists in the current budget. The school behavior specialists will be funded out of Title I, replacing student achievement specialist positions, which were reduced. Program 2220, educational media services, reduction of 0.5 classified media assistant. Program 2240, instructional staff development, reduction of 2.5 FTE licensed teacher on special assignment positions. That was our licensed mentoring program. Program 2410, Office of the Principal Services, reduction of 1 FTE middle school administrator. Program 2490, other support services, school administration, reduction of 1 FTE licensed TOSA for the equity team. Program 2552, vehicle operations services, reduction of $645,000 in capital outlay for bus replacement. Program 2660, technical services, reduction of 1 FTE supervisor staff and 1 FTE TOSA. The district also experienced some reduced grant funding due to 25-26 and anticipates additional reductions to some grants. Some adjustments include Program 1111, elementary programs, and Program 1121, learning centers. The district funded instructional assistance for elementary and special education with general fund and student investment account grants funds. Because the SIA grant 25-26 was less, the district eliminated some classified positions prior to 25-26 starting. The district reduced 16.63 classified elementary instructional assistants in the general fund and utilized the funding for special education instructional assistants, which were reduced from the SIA grant. Program 2150, general fund, added 1.0 licensed FTE, reduced from IDE due to funding decline. Last year, under Program 2120, guidance services, the district added 9 FTE student behavior specialists previously funded by Title I and reduced Program 2210, improvement in instruction, by 9 FTE student achievement specialists, funding these positions between Title I and early literacy grants. Because final allocations for the early literacy grants were less than budgeted, the district ended up utilizing Title I funds only for the SAS positions. Due to general fund reductions, the SAS positions were eliminated for 26-27, and the school behavior specialists will be funded by Title I starting in 26-27. Program 2240, instructional staff development, reduced 2.0 FTE licensed TOSAs and the paraeducator program funding in the SIA grant. Additional teachers will be retained to basically retain lower class sizes. We anticipate that the budget will change as the district will be in negotiations with 3 employee groups, licensed administrator and manager confidential supervisor. Despite a challenging fiscal environment, our schools continue to demonstrate strong academic growth across both mathematics and literacy. In math, every elementary and middle school showed increased mid-year growth compared to the previous year, with several schools already reaching more than half their annual growth targets by mid-year. More than 1,200 students improved by at least 1 full placement level this winter, reflecting meaningful progress for a significant portion of our K-8 students. This growth reflects consistent data-informed practices across the district, including structured time for educators to analyze student data, adjust instruction to better meet student needs. In literacy, we're seeing sustained multi-year improvement at the elementary level, with every grade K-5 increasing the percentage of students meeting mid-year benchmarks since 21. Foundational reading skills that were once below benchmark are now exceeding expectations, aligning with our focused instructional shifts in early literacy and writing. At the secondary level, early indicators show promising growth in reading comprehension alongside expanded access to targeted supports across content literacy strategies. These results reflect a district-wide commitment to aligned instruction, high expectations, and targeted support for students, even as resources become more limited. Our educators continue to focus on what matters most. They are ensuring all students have access to strong, consistent learning experience that support their growth and success. At the same time, the district continues to navigate challenges related to curriculum adoption cycles. We're currently behind in the adoption of high school health and K-12 social studies materials, social science, which impacts our ability to provide the most up-to-date, standards-aligned resources for students and teachers. While staff have worked to supplement and strengthen existing materials, staying current with state adoption timelines remains an important priority as we look ahead and plan for the future. The district will need to make continued reductions without additional increases to the state school fund. The 2 curriculum adoptions for high school health and K-2 social sciences are estimated to cost $1.6 million. The district also needs to plan for technology replacement, as many of our Chromebooks will need replacing by the 27-28 school year, with an estimated cost of $2 million. The district also has estimated its general fund bus replacement budget the past 2 years to assist with continuing school-based supports. However, about 14 of the district buses are either 20 years old or older and will need replacement. The David Douglas School District budget was constructed with the following objectives: finding options to control spending during 25-26 school year, ensuring that we maintain health and safety standards to ensure proper learning environments for when students return, focusing on minimizing staff and budget reductions based on the district's focus on student performance, and continue to focus on student achievement goals. I would like to thank all staff for their efforts in preparing the 26-27 budget, as well as the budget committee for volunteering their time and efforts in this budget process. In addition, all bargaining units have worked diligently with the district and their members to maximize efficiency, preserving staffing and programs, and make a positive difference for our children. We have scrutinized the budget to make adjustments to minimize the loss of educational opportunities for our children, protect the instructional goals of the district, maintain health and safety standards in our buildings and grounds, and provide reserves for an uncertain financial future. The staff stands ready to assist the Budget Committee in the process of approving the 26-27 school year budget. We thank the School Board and Budget Committee for your volunteer service to the students of David Douglas School District. You're making a positive difference in the lives of the children in our community to ensure they learn, grow, and thrive. And thank you, and back to Carrie.
Thank you, Ken, for a very well informed and thoughtful message. All right, next on the agenda is the budget overview from Pat.
Welcome. So tonight we're going to go over the 26-27 proposed budget, and rather than walk and talk, I'm going to sit because it seems like I either miss the clicker or something goes wrong. So tonight's powers, review fund accounting and budgeting, and overview of each fund in the 26-27 proposed budget. Why do we have a budget and a budget process? Well, because it's required by law. So we are a municipal corporation. We may not expend money or certify to the assessor an ad valorem tax rate or estimated amount of ad valorem taxes to be imposed in any year unless the municipal corporation has complied with local budget law. So in other words, if you don't follow the law, you don't get to assess taxes against your property holders. And ad valorem, someone asked me that, so I thought I'd stick this in here. It means according to the value, so rather than a fixed tax amount, it's a calculation based on the value of the property. That's why it increases every year, because usually your property value increases every year. Local budget law is prescribed by ORS Chapter 294. It prescribes everything from the makeup of the budget committee, the legal notices that we have to do. So we actually have to publish legal notices in the newspaper. That's required. It's kind of archaic, but we still are required to put one in the newspaper. And one rotator on our website to inform the public of the meeting and the budget. It describes the format and content of the budget document, so there's not a lot I can do with the budget document to make it more reader-friendly. We do try, but the details that they want are not necessarily the details that are the easiest to be read. The content of the budget message that Ken just gave you, that's all prescribed by law. Public testimony, so don't forget, tonight we're going to have some audience participation. We'll see if anybody came to have any testimony tonight. There is a budget hearing that's prescribed by law. The board will do that in June. That will be another opportunity for public testimony, so that gives our community the opportunity to come in and give their feedback. Then we have the board resolution to adopt and appropriate the budget and to declare and categorize the tax levies. And then, of course, the game begins. Things change, as we can see through that budget message. We had a lot of shifts and changes this past year. So sometimes we have to do a supplemental budget process to modify the budget. To give you a timeline of when all this stuff happens, we usually start in November and go through April and actually preparing budget materials. We're looking at revenue projections. We're looking at our expenses as we know them. We're updating that information constantly as information comes in. The superintendent will present the proposed budget, usually the end of April or May, as we did tonight. The budget committee will review and have a public meeting, take public testimony, and that's April or May. And then again in June, the school board will hold a public hearing and adopt the budget. So your committee responsibilities are to have a public meeting, listen to public comments and questions, and your fiscal powers, by majority, you can specify the amount of tax revenue, establish maximum expenditures, approve the total taxes, and approve the budget. Once you have completed all those tasks, it goes to the budget hearing held in June. Again, there's public testimony to be received. Board reviews the budget. They can amend the budget at that time. Board must approve the budget by June 30 for next fiscal year. Otherwise, we legally can't spend funds. Fund accounting and budgeting. So the budget's made up of several divisions called funds. Each fund is made up of a self-balancing set of records with a resource or revenue and a requirement or expenditure component. Funds are classified as general funds, special revenue, debt service, capital, and internal service. As Ken stated, our budget for 26-27, the proposed budget is $350,508,435. We have, as you can see, the general fund is the major component of that at just over 158 million, followed right behind in special revenue funds. You'll notice over the time in David Douglas, if you've watched that number has continued to grow in special revenue. Part of that's due to our early childhood program, and part of that is due to things like the student investment account and other things that, other grants opportunities that come through. We have our capital projects fund, so that's going the opposite direction. So as we get those projects done and we spend the money, that will deplete. We have the debt service fund, that's to pay back our bondholders. We have our internal service fund, which is reprographics. So when you look at our resources, you can see there the big red or orange state pie piece. That's where primarily all of our funding comes from. So you can see 73% of our funding is coming from the state. About 21 million from local property taxes. You can see 16.4 beginning fund balance, about 10% there. And you'll notice over the last few years that has declined. We have been eating into that to help keep us afloat. We also have a little bit of federal money and some intermediate, which is primarily passed through from MESD. State School Fund grant, it's received over a 2-year period. It's updated from many different data collections. We actually just got an update on Friday. So if there's something in my presentation tonight that might be a little bit different from Ken's message, that's probably why, is I'm going to grab that number off of the last update. Factors in the state school fund grant calculation, the average daily membership, that's not enrollment. So we have an ADMR for resident, ADMW for weighted. So every student is in that ADMR. If they meet a special category, such as English as a second language, they're a special education student with an IEP, they're in the pregnant and parenting program, there's an extra weighting to that. Each one's a little different. We have the transportation grant, so we do get 70% of our transportation expenditures and depreciation through the state school fund. Just a reminder that our local revenue, so whatever taxes we take in, is actually offset in the calculation of the state school fund, and that's for everybody, not just for us. The state school fund is $11.36 billion for this biennium. And the next state economic forecast will be towards the end of this month. So we'll hear a little bit more there. I will say it's not been on the rosy side. It's been a little bit hesitant, and so we'll see how that comes through the end of this month. So this is a chart that you saw in Ken's message. You can see that we saw in 23-24 our ADMW. You can see on those blue numbers, we're starting to go up a little bit. So that was a nice plus. But then this year we're seeing a decline. So 2024-25, we had 11,484.91. Right now, we're looking at 11,174.35. It actually might end up a little less than that. And for 26-27, we're seeing at least another 100 in decline in ADMW. So we do anticipate, you saw I did adjust that poverty number down, and that was based on some calculations from the state. The poverty numbers are based on the Small Area Income and Poverty Estimates program. That is a federal government data house that they use. They use IRS state level data, SNAP data from state and county, and then some other poverty data to come up with exactly how many students or what's your estimated population in poverty. So going back to 2011, you'll see that the calculation, we had 4,260 according to this population calculator. You'll see as of 2024, which is the latest data. So the data is always a year behind. So in December of 25, you're getting data from 2024. You'll see that it is 2,048. So almost half, a little less than half. So that results in, of course, a decline in our funding. So just some concerns we are seeing with the state school fund. So back in 2018-19, you're going to see the ADMW 704,553 statewide. The last projection, which was for 26-27, delivered the first Monday in March, 663,702. So still declining pretty significantly in the state. For us, you can see here 2017, 18, 13,313, 43, down to 11,058.18. So again, we're seeing that decline still. Revenue uncertainty for us, reductions to federally funded programs. We're expecting probably the same or less, basically flat funding for Title I, Title III. IDEA, we anticipate that that might be a little bit less. We aren't sure. We did get our Title I, II, III allocations, preliminary allocations, but we have not gotten them for next year for IDEA. Again, as I mentioned, we're really seeing a decline in that ADMW. All of those markers are starting to decline, so that means just reduced funding that we're going to need to address as we look at the budget in the following year. Property taxes, you can see there just over 4.5 billion. So my estimate for 25-26 at 4,527,770,124 was pretty close to what it actually was, which was 4,527,339,967 dollars. I think that's one of the closer ones I've gotten. So what we're seeing is a little bit of an increase in compression. So those are the differences between the market value and the property tax value and the ability to gain additional taxing. We're still researching. We're noticing a little bit of a trend downward this year in tax collections. I still haven't gotten a response from the county. So we do expect to assess 21.6 million in taxes. That's before delinquencies and discounts. And I do want to bring to your attention back in 24-25, there's a big jump there that you can see between my estimate and the actual 4 billion to 4.4 billion. And that was the Lentz urban renewal area rolled back into our tax base. And so that's already back in the tax base. The next urban renewal area, I think, still has 5 or 6 years before it rolls back on. So we really won't see an abnormality like that for another few years. General fund requirements, so again, balanced budget. You can see here our salaries and benefits make up the priority of our budget at 82%. We have purchase services at about 10%. Supplies and materials are 3%. A little bit in capital outlay, and then other in contingency. So things that we, some uncertainty, we still don't have insurance rates for next year for our staff. We are hearing there's some strife at OUBB, in particular with one of our insurance plans that MODA is really struggling to keep within the constraints of the statute, which is a 3.4% increase over all of their offerings. And so that's one of the reasons why we put this here, is because depending on what people select, that 3.4% might be a little more or a little less. Contingency is dropped. Normally that is at 5%. We did drop it to 4% this year to try and help ease the reductions needed. And then just a reminder that any fund balance is a measure of our financial strength. I will tell you that I did get a credit holder, one of our bondholders, called and asked, why is our ending fund and beginning fund, why are those going down? So, which they're paying attention. So just to let you know that that isn't something that I just say. We do get phone calls every once in a while, and I was surprised that I did get a little email saying, hey, what's going on here? It does provide a cushion for revenue shortfalls. Fund balance is used as a tool for managing cash flow. So just think about trying to pay all the bills, and tax revenue comes generally in November. So then we have to use that to balance that out. We use it for long-term planning, and it can represent a one-time resource. So we've seen this before, and I just want to bring it to your attention because you often hear Ken say deficit spending. And what that means is basically you're spending more than the money that you're bringing in, and you're balancing with whatever's left over, so your fund balance. So you can see here, beginning fund balance of 16.4. So we have net revenues of just about 142 million. If you take contingency out of our requirements, that's planned spending for 152 million. That's 10.3 million, less than what we actually are bringing in. So that's a planned spend down. We'll move along to special revenue funds. These are used to record transactions associated with restricted or dedicated revenues. So those restrictions may be imposed by a grantor or a statute. So federal grants, state grants, student activity accounts, these kinds of things all are for a special purpose. And those are delineated by the grantor or the statute. And that's how we need to account for them and be accountable to our constituents and grantors. Special revenue funds. So out of these funds, 114.4 million. You can see the grants fund is just over 101. Nutrition fund is about 9. Student body, just about 307. Transportation replacement, not quite 2 million. And energy conservation fund, just over 2 million. In that grants fund, primary components, early childhood special education, just under $40 million. That includes all their Medicaid billing and their early childhood evaluations that they do. As a reminder, that program provides evaluations for the local school districts in our county. Measure 98, that's about 2.9 million. That does include some carryover from this year. Title I, 4.9 million. That includes some transfers and some carryover. So we can transfer like Title II and Title IV into Title I. That's kind of a strange concept for grants, but that is something that with those particular grants we can do. And that's helping us stay afloat and keep the staffing. IDEA is 1.8 million, including pass-through from Columbia Regional. Arts tax, that one's down a little bit. You may have seen the article, and we anticipate that with the reduction in students and the declining enrollment in elementary, that we will probably see less funding. We have tried to retain those staff as best we can by offsetting in the general fund. The Student Investment Account or Student Success Act, 10.7 million for K-12. That includes a little carryover. 13.7 million for early childhood. That also includes a little carryover. And those particular grants and student investment, we have to spend all the funds by next June. Otherwise, they go back to the state. So our debt service funds, these are used to pay the outstanding debts from our general obligation and pension obligation bonds. So you can see here our general obligation bonds are about 10.7 million. Our PERS bonds are just under 4.5 million. We do anticipate with our PERS bonds, those should fall off here, I believe, in 27, 28. And we did experience that normally when you do a pension obligation bond, you invest that. The goal, of course, is to invest those funds and get enough interest to help reduce your rates for your public employee retirement system. And the goal is to do that with the same timeline as your bonds. For us, and for those who don't know, we sold bonds in 2007, right before the market crash. We did lose a substantial amount of principal, which meant that we didn't gain as much interest. We do anticipate that our site account, where the bond proceeds were put, will be depleted probably by next spring, resulting in a little bit of an increase in our PERS rate for next year, which you may have seen in the assumption summary. And then the following year, where we would have anticipated probably our final year of that site account rate decrease, that will actually increase more. So we do anticipate that going up. Let's see, Capital Projects Fund. So that accounts for our general obligation receipts, bond receipts. Our capital reserve fund was closed, and so that's basically in the budget book because there was some activity in the prior to actual years. When that activity goes to zero, that will fall off. And then the construction excise tax accounts for capital projects funded through that construction excise tax that the city gets for us. So capital projects fund, you remember a few years ago that was around $150 million. We're down to about 61 million. Construction excise tax, we're at about 1.4 million. Internal service funds are used to record transactions associated with activities providing services to other funds. So think of our print shop, which prints items, and then that gets billed out to other departments. Same with postage. When we send postage, we have a central place where that goes, and that gets billed back. That's just under $500,000 for this budget for 26-27. Questions?
These reductions in students, do we know where they're going? Do we do kind of like an exit strategy, or I know you talked to the other superintendents in our area, so did they get an increase from us, or are they in the same boat? What's going on there?
No, that's a great question. And historically, that has held true. Historically, there's been a little bit of when declines more towards West Portland. I know we're not West Portland, but Reynolds thinks of us more west. Typically, there would be seen a transition of students, but that's not the case. Across the area, including Gresham Barlow, Reynolds, Park Rose, we're all basically down in enrollment, and we don't have trend data now where they were going. Years ago, we were able to check a little better, and we had a better understanding. Like we knew students were moving towards the Salem area and Vancouver area. Right now, we don't have that information. We aren't sure where they're going, but they aren't moving to other districts. I mean, obviously some families are. Obviously some families are moving. But overall, the trend in the region is enrollments down from Portland all the way east to Reynolds.
How's our occupation of housing in the area? Do you know?
I don't know.
Okay.
And just to give you just an FYI, enrollment is down in every district in Oregon except 3. Every district except 3. So it's not a Portland issue. It's just an issue in the state, and the enrollment is down everywhere. It's with birth rates. There's a lot of things that have to do with it, but it's not just us people moving out of Portland, because it's the whole state is having this issue.
Yeah, I think I read something. The death rates are higher than the birth rates.
Yeah.
At this
So, because you meet with your equals in the other districts, are their budgets doing the same thing that ours is?
Yeah, I can't speak to the exact details, but I can tell you what in the meetings I've had with them, the answer is yes. The reductions actually, my understanding is the reductions that our neighboring districts are much, much deeper, actually. Many of them are making the news because of some of the reductions that they're are forced to take this year, but yes. The only district I know that's more flat is, my understanding, is Centennial when it comes to budget-wise, but otherwise every other district that I talk to in our region, we do meet regularly, are going through significant reductions on par with ours, and even deeper percentage-wise. Remember, like Park Rose is a much smaller district, so the decimal point's in a different spot, but percentage-wise it's much deeper.
How are the gas prices affecting us?
Well, yeah, we're seeing a little uptick in our gas costs for fueling our buses, for fueling our maintenance vehicles. So we're kind of watching to see. We keep hearing the federal administration saying it's going to be 6 weeks, it's going to be 8 weeks, it's going to be. So we're going to need to reassess and see if we're going to need to do some shifting for next year, depending on how long these prices last.
What's our mix of diesel versus other fuels for our transportation?
I would have to actually go back and look at that because some of the newer buses we're buying are going to regular gas versus diesel. So,
Before we continue on, I know we're going to get into this. I just want to make sure we're staying on schedule here, and that is to open it up to public comment. But we did not have anybody register, so now I want to move us into committee deliberation, and you're free to ask your questions and comment.
I'd like to know about, as we're watching, and I've had to watch it for several years now, the challenges that we face budget-wise. One of the things that I see around our region is conversations about school districts losing instructional days over the course of their years. And I haven't sensed that that's as big an issue for David Douglas. It seems like we're trying to preserve those. Can you tell us how we're doing in that regard with this budget?
Yeah, so we do not have a proposal in this budget. I believe what you're talking to, Ms. Pawerski, is furlough days. Many of our neighboring districts have taken furlough days, and we have not. All the way back to 9, 10, 11, when we had the recession, we didn't do furlough days at that time in this district, and we never have since then. It just hasn't been something that we've explored because we've tried to keep the instructional days. We have had conversations about it over the years. Even this year, kind of off the record or a little bit of conversation with different individuals about it, but we felt that we wanted to balance the budget on our contractual days and not a reduction in days. So there's not a reduced days in this budget.
I think the thing I found most, I don't want to say alarming, that's not quite the word I mean, because that can have a negative connotation. One of the things that struck me the most in this budget is the number of teaching positions that are being reduced. I wanted to ask, I know in the past, one of the things we looked at was we were reducing positions, but they weren't actual bodies, they were open positions. When we look at these positions that are being reduced this year, is it a mixture of actual reductions in force, or is it mostly just reducing open positions?
Yeah, great question. So first, just to reflect on the number of positions, I want the entire committee to know that we don't just say, oh, let's cut teachers. What we try to do is formula base. So we look at class sizes, and based on those class sizes, we basically staff on our FTE. So when we looked at the reductions, I just got a report today for May's enrollment or last month's enrollment, we're down enrollment this year. So I mean, throughout the year it's gone down, and that is not to say that we do not have high class sizes. That's not to say that our teachers are working very hard every single day, but based on that enrollment, we have to have a number that we use that a number which establishes how much FTE we need, which then establishes if we're over, I hate this term, overstaffed or not, and then based on that class size, we staff our buildings. So now to the second part of your question, it comes down to reduction of force. We were projecting a reduction force, but due to the hard work of HR and kind of going through our process of the article, right now we are not projecting any true reduction in force as far as people receiving, it's kind of known as a pink slip or a reduction. So it's being met, the reductions you see and we talk about are being met through attrition. We didn't have that when we started, but as we've continued through month by month to develop this budget and to go through, we know we have to reduce this amount. We've landed on a place where it does not look like we will have a reduction in force.
One of the things that
Yeah.
indicates to me is that you could say that our reduction in the budget reflects. Let me think about how I'm trying to say this. We're still doing more with less over time. Isn't that true? Because it sounds like we're trying to maintain a constant staffing level with less money coming from the state and less resources available to meet the needs that we have, while all of our budget components grow just because of inflation and how the economy works.
Yeah, I would say that's true, other than when you look at the reductions we made, those are real. So even though it's not people because of the numbers and attrition, it's still services that kids will not get next year one way or the other. So there's a true impact in this budget. But yes, we work hard every year in this budget, or as long as we can, to go through that process to, again, glide a little bit. The deficit, again, in all transparency to this committee, that glide, next year it could be a lot bigger cliff. 2 years it could be we're playing the odds. I think someone sent an email about kicking the can down the road, or a little bit. That's true, and I will own that. We're year by year, a little bit, doing what we can to keep systems, procedures, supports for kids. Next year, we might not be able to keep them all. Or excuse me, the year after next, we might not be able to keep them all. But this budget right now keeps the resources we have. We aren't cutting any major programs. If you think about athletics, think about some of those things for kids specifically, we aren't cutting. But again, there are real reductions that are impacting kids, impacting staff. But yeah, that's intentional. We're trying to do that. And I don't know, if you see it or not, but yes, all of our plates, the metaphor we use, are full. Everyone's plates are full as we make reductions, and we continue to stand up, lean in. Again, all of our employees stand up and lean in for kids, but it's getting tough, and it's getting tighter along the way.
Do you mind walking me through how the reduction in students equals out to be the reduction in cost too? So like I'm thinking, we lose 320 students. We minus 10 teachers. Each teacher manages about 30 students. So like the outcome of that seems almost net zero a little bit. And then is it mostly like we have the exact same facilities? Costs are all overhead is the exact same no matter if we had 320 students or if we remove them? Because it seems like in an ideal perfect world, as you remove the students and the money goes down, they cost you less because they're gone and everything evens itself out. But how does that actually balance out when we say we lost 320, we lost this money? What is that, like percentage-wise, what are we losing?
So you have to figure in all the other costs that are increasing. The gas, the utilities, salaries, benefits. And so when you start adding those things in, like I think, and I probably didn't mention it in my presentation, so PERS rates are anticipated at like 29%. Those are our advisory rates for the next biennium. Right now it's for our Tier 1, Tier 2, 25%. So that's 4 percentage points. And if you take the general fund salaries and 4 percentage points, that's over $3 million just for PERS costs. So when you think about this past year and you look at the state school fund from year to year, so from 25, 26 to 26, 27, it's about a $2 million increase in funding. So you have to think about, that's all I have for every single thing that's coming along, the gas, the utilities, the PERS costs, the salary requests, the benefit requests. And then when you're looking at staffing, we're looking at a ratio for the number of students per teacher. It's different for different levels. So then you take that into account, and then you start doing the math, and then you realize that maybe you might have to cut a little more, so the ratio goes up. Or you go over here and you cut a program, the ratio goes down. So I don't know that I can give you an actual percentage, if that makes sense.
I noticed in the online budget there's a cut of it's 0.75 FTE for the online school. In years past, that's been an opportunity for us to garner additional students. Is that still the case, or are we seeing that flat, or how is the online school doing? I guess that's a good question.
Yeah, it's doing great. Enrollment is up and continues to go up. I had the privilege of, I don't know if she's out here, but there she is, Shauna Myers, our principal, just last couple weeks ago to talk about enrollment. I know she's proud, so I don't know. I saw you stand up. Do you want to talk about your enrollment real quick?
It's doing great. We're about 100 higher than we were this time last year. So enrollment is up.
Thank you, Shauna.
And the classified instructional IA really works with elementary, and so that's not where we're seeing the increase. Is that correct? We're seeing it more at high school?
High school is the big enrollment increase. Elementary stayed about the same over the last
Thank you.
That position was held vacant this year, and so that was an opportunity to.
I had a question about the elimination of the licensed mentoring program. So one of the things I have always appreciated in the school district as my kids have worked their way through is the quality of the teachers that they've had. And I feel like we've been very fortunate with what we've been provided with. And part of being able to have excellent teachers is being able to have an excellent environment for the teachers to work in. And I was curious if that mentoring program is something that negatively impacts teachers that have been around for a while. Does it negatively impact our ability to bring in qualified new teachers? How is that going to impact us going into the future?
Yeah, I think yes to both. I mean, it's a terrible reduction. It's an amazing team that has the fingerprints on all of our new teachers, and the feedback we get, the impact of that has been tremendous. Huge bragging rights in our district that we have that. One of the few districts that does have it this year. Difficult decision, and back to your question about, like, for example, job fairs and other areas, one of the things that we often get to brag about is our mentoring program. We have a different type of mentoring. It's not like this and the one that's reduced. But we do have what's called a PALS program. That's a mentoring program within the building. It's a contractual program that we will have and still support, but the loss itself of the mentoring program is a huge loss and reduction and impactful. I believe that our administrators, they believe one of the most important things they do is hire, so bringing in amazing people, but those supports and backfilling that loss, again, that's an example of it's a loss, and we haven't quite answered how we're going to, in fact, we're not going to be able to do what it was done with that mentoring program. There will be a loss there. Yeah.
I think not just the general fund, but also the one that was in our grant. We started a para-educator mentor team that was really amazing. Really helped out our instructional assistants rather than them getting just plopped into a classroom, them getting some training in advance to deal with behaviors, to deal with students with their learning and helping them along. And that was hard also. Both of those programs really have a lot of impact, but when you're looking at cuts, I mean, over the next few years, we're really going to be making even tougher decisions, I think, than that, so, which is unfortunate.
Can you talk about some of the cuts you've seen the neighboring districts having to make that we've so far avoided, some of the more drastic ones? Just to kind of paint a picture, because I know I hear about them, but not everyone does, and because I know the cuts we have on paper are bad, but I hear all the cuts happening everywhere, and it could be so much worse.
Yeah. So I will talk in general. I'm not real comfortable talking about other districts because I don't know what I do know, other than the conversations of reductions, which I already shared, is really in the press that people have seen. So I know, without using district names, I know there's a district that basically has proposed eliminating all elementary music programs. I know there's a district that's proposed going to part-time, I believe, counselors, PE, and music across, on top of about 150 FTE reduction, I believe is the number, which is a district our size. I mean, Portland, I think we've all maybe read the press around Portland, hundreds of FTE reductions, furlough days this year, cuts this year, cuts to programs. I've heard of districts across the state that are basically taking TAN notes or loans to meet payroll and finish the year. It's the state of Oregon, I would use the word, and I will escalate it, I think is in a crisis when it comes to educational funding. And we're right. We're just starting. I mean, the next biennium next year, what comes out of that biennium, what's happening in the rest of the state of Oregon, and the reductions that are coming, based on what I'm hearing, going to be deep.
I may be washing my hair during the meeting next year.
Where are we ranked as far as test scores and everything for the state? Do you know where we're at there?
I don't, do you know the ranking, where we're ranked?
I'm just wondering if that's some of the reason why we've got a decrease in enrollment, because parents are, so much information is available online.
Yeah, yeah.
And so mom and dad are fixing to move here, and, well, their test scores aren't so good, so let's go to somebody that we want our kids to
Yeah,
go higher in.
It could be, that could be. I do know we, every year when we look at the results, again, they're always behind, but we always compare them to local districts, just the districts around us, and we're at the top of that list, usually number 1 or number 2 throughout the different categories. So that one we're standing up if you think about our local region, but I've never seen a comparison necessarily or a ranking with outside areas. When we have had the opportunity, back when I told you we knew families were going to Salem area or Vancouver area, the communication we were getting was less about the school district and more about resources, community resources in those areas, and being able to leverage those resources, as well as real estate costs, the cost of rent. Again, that's a little bit old data. I don't have real new data right now. Some of them we just don't know. Back to Jose's conversation, the number in here, 700,000 students down to 600 and something thousand students. The state of Oregon, after COVID, 30,000 students just didn't come back. They just didn't come back. So more students that are enrolled in homeschooled, left the state. You're right, charter schools and online. One of the reasons we stood up on online was to make sure that we have an opportunity, because a lot of districts are losing a number of students to online, where we have 400 and something, I believe, in ours. So, but I, that question very well could be some of our families looking at different schools because of that, but I'm not sure.
Speaking of that, does our budget, can that be used to increase facilities, or is that a bond thing? And the reason I say that is because from the football field to the tennis courts, we got a grassy area. That's a classroom if it's fixed right. And right now that classroom is wet 90% of the school year. So we've got a classroom out there at the football field that can be used by anybody because it's got turf. Any idea when we could do the turf? And then the other question to go with facilities is, I was on the committee to find property, which is the Gateway Oaks. Is there plans for that anywhere in the future?
So to your first question, could it be, first, usually capital improvements are bonds just because of the price tag around them, right? To use our general fund money that you saw in the budget, if we use that, can we use that to turf the field? Yes, but if we turf that and spend the millions of dollars out of our budget, general fund, to do that, that comes from somewhere in the general fund, right? So the answer to your question is yes, you can do it. Typically you don't, because it's such a large price tag. We go out with a general obligation bond to help build, help safety, help add those type of additions. I think that you're nodding, so I think that answer, I apologize, I'm listening to myself, I don't know. So, and the second thing is related to, what was it? Oh, Elks. Yeah, so we are in partnership right now with Prosper Portland. They've come, and we're looking at the possibility at building a soccer field there, no cost to us. That's in the interim until the opportunity where the district can build a school there. Again, that would take an obligation bond. We wouldn't have the money in the general fund to build an elementary school, but the projections right now are still to build an elementary school someday in the future, and until then, add something to help the community, bring something back into that community like a soccer field or some sort of turf field.
And I will add, the board's been very involved in these conversations and trying to steer it toward them building something that could stay, even if we had to build a school there. Just putting their fields in a manner that we could use them again or have them be something for the community instead of just for now.
Part of my reasoning for the facilities to be changed out here is this school was built before Title IX, and now we're trying to integrate Title IX into a school that's not capable of doing that. Right now, we've got a ball field on the other side of the CTE building that could be used for the girls and bring those girls home where they should be. Because right now, we've got them stuck in some farm field back in the Hooties that isn't being taken care of.
Yeah. So those conversations are definitely part of the conversation right now. That's different than the dream. I can tell you that I absolutely agree with you. I have a vision, a dream. I'd love to see from the football field to the tennis courts, all turf. And I can name districts that have been able to do that over the years. Someday that will be. And then your conversation about, well, that adds teaching stations, outdoor usable space. I absolutely agree. The issue right now is the price tag. It would take a bond. We'd have to go through that process. There's other ways to possibly do it in the future, is you partner with the right organization, you partner with the right people that they're going through some sort of charitable donation process, which our ears are always open around that and looking for that type of stuff. But if we don't get turf, if that doesn't happen, there still could be conversations about where our fields, how we might switch, what we might do, which are kind of happening right now. I have had the opportunity to talk a little bit with the principal about that. There's been no decision made. I can't tell you it's fast tracked or anything like that, but I can tell you that facilities has actually been over to the softball field to visit it. There's been conversation with the athletic director. I believe he's in the audience this evening as well. He's ignoring me. That's what he does. I know, he's ignoring me. I'm putting you on the spot, Brad. No, so seriously, I understand what you're saying, but right now the price tag to turf, all that doesn't exist in our budget.
The reason I say on our facilities like that is if our kids have no pride in coming to play because their facilities look like crap, we're never going to have good athletes. There's some schools, and I understand they're probably in some of the richer neighborhoods, because I think we're still one of the poorest on the east side. But they put money into their facilities, hence they get the athletes, because there's some of our students that are athletes at other schools because of facilities, and we need to do a better job, especially for the girls, because the girls have been crapped on horribly. I mean, I sent you a video. Any of you guys want to see that video? It looks like a farm field. In fact, I think somebody told me they had to play with a white softball because they couldn't see it through all the regular ball through all the dandelions. So I'll get off my high horse now.
I have a specific question on purchase services. I'm on page 4.4, just on the beginning of general fund. And I just want to understand a little bit about specifically the tuition to other Oregon districts. It's just the fluctuation and to private schools too. If you can just speak to a little bit about that. 371 and 373 on purchase services.
Right, that was a budget that got reduced a few years ago, and we've just seen an explosion in the number of kids needing an outside placement.
Is that Oregon districts too? Is that in 371 and 373?
Correct.
And charter too, right? So that would be all three of those line items?
So the charter school is really just Arthur Academy, and they get the pass-through funds and that's all based similar to us, and so it's based on their ADM and how much the state is giving us, and that gets passed through. We get to keep 20% of that for administering it. 371 and 373, so 371, a lot of that is our programming through Multnomah ESD. So to give you an idea, we had a placement that was about $160,000 per student for one of the more expensive placements. We got our initial numbers for next year were 180, and then I just saw an update at 190 for the same placement. So their costs are skyrocketing. They're passing that cost along to us. We do have kids in deaf and hard of hearing program with the regional program, so that we pay for because we don't have that service here. So that's why you're seeing some of those costs. Did that help answer?
Yeah, thank you.
And really, it just depends on where the kids are, whether it's a district or whether it's someplace like Serendipity. So what the kids' needs are.
So if a student transfers from here to Centennial or here to Park Rose, are they captured in this tuition too, or that money doesn't pass through our budget, right? Does that go straight to Centennial or wherever they transfer to?
It kind of depends, and so usually I think that would follow the student. So Centennial would need to pick that up. Sometimes there's agreements. It kind of depends.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Same page. 340. Travel. What are we spending $254,000 on for travel? For what I understand is business purposes, was how I read it in the notes.
So travel can be many things. So it can be mileage, so around the district. So when people travel, they get mileage. It also can mean conference fees. So when people go to conferences, we have some things in our collective bargaining agreements as far as people going to conferences, paying for the conference fee, any type of airfare if it's not around here, or travel cost, lodging, mileage, that kind of thing.
Is that in the licensed teacher contract? Is that the same pot of money for the professional development? It gets just kind of distributed throughout the budget?
That could be. Sometimes that gets allocated between different categories depending on what we're seeing. Could be, if we're seeing they're using it for substitutes, it might get below on the substitute or on contracted services.
Same page. 380. I didn't quite understand the note for what exactly that kind of stuff could be.
So non-instructional, professional, and technical services. So that generally a 380 is used with a support or non-instructional category. So if I'm getting substitutes for people doing trainings, doing things in Brooks area where we're giving out curriculum time to do mapping or anything like that, that might be a substitute for that. That could also be an architect. That can be legal services. So if you look at the board's budget, you're going to see 380s there for legal services, audit services, those types of things.
Thank you.
The classrooms down here at the end, what are those being used for? And if they are being used, when are they going to be used? And who's going to occupy those?
So those classrooms were intended for the Child Development Center. And so we brought that forward to the board. Right now we're looking at some additional funding for those classrooms. And looking at seeing if we can get any county funding through Baby Promise. And then also there's a preschool promise funding that we're going to use for the classrooms to provide services there.
And so we built something before it's occupied?
So we built something, we were going to move folks over. They didn't quite move over in December. And so they'll be moving, and that program will be moving from North Powellhurst over.
Well, what are we doing with North Powellhurst besides put the girls there for softball?
So North Powellhurst eventually, that one's getting used for additional preschool. And so we'll be applying for additional preschools for that and focusing mostly, I think, on 3-year-olds.
I have a question about assessment and testing, page 4.72. I guess this may be directed at Brooke. Thinking, and we can table this question, but I just see a reduction of the management of assessment and testing from 1 FTE to next year being 0. And so I'm curious how you think that may impact our processes. I know that that's something that we all are really impressed about, that our testing scores are improving. So yeah, if that's an appropriate question for you.
Yeah, it's up to you, Brooke. I don't know if Brooke wants to answer. So, oh, go ahead. An example of the plate, right, adding to the plate. It's a perfect example of that. We had a position through attrition that was open. We asked the question because we're needing to reduce anyway, could we assume these duties? And again, it's real, but that was a decision we made, and that's the direction we ended up.
I have a question. Oh, sorry. You done?
I'll go after you.
Oh, I just wanted to ask about kind of the trend we're seeing with increases in insurance too. It's over the last couple of years. Can you tell us a little more? Is this something that we should be anticipating, that type of growth over time, or can we project?
I think it's really going to depend on claims and claims they see. So things they're focusing on are unfortunately sexual abuse. So you've seen a lot in the news about that. Those claims generally are not cheap. And then also large property claims. And so we talked, I think, in the board meeting about the need for wooden truss assessments, because they're seeing when, in particular, where there's heavy snows on large buildings and that are antiquated, those trusses aren't holding up. And so that's where they're looking at, you know, how do we redistribute those claims, because this is not a traditional insurance, it's an insurance pool. So many school districts try to mitigate as best they can. So I wouldn't, I'm hoping that we'll see those kind of die down, but I don't know.
Earlier this week, I submitted a list of questions on behalf of the Equity Advisory Committee, and I'm just wondering when those will be answered, or do I need to ask them one by one?
So I think the answers were at your places.
Okay.
So if you
So
want,
they're not available out loud to everybody.
we could read them out loud.
Oh, I'm just curious. This is my first time in this meeting, so I don't know how it operates. Okay.
It's really up to you or the board team or the committee team. Many times I will say in the past when we've gotten questions like this, Pat's tried to answer them, and they are shared with everyone, and we haven't read them out, but that doesn't mean we can't. It's really up to the team and committee if they look at them and feel like they want more clarity, or if you want us to go through them one by one, it's absolutely up to the team.
I would love to just go through them so we can say we did it instead of just relying on a handout.
So I think the first question you submitted was, can the proposed budget be made publicly available prior to the public testimony? Public testimony would be taken tonight, and so yes, when I can't give you the budget without putting it online. So it has to be available, and that's what I talked about earlier, is those notices to the public that we have to do in the newspaper and on the internet, on our website. So that's to let the general public know that that document and about the timeline of when it'll be available, when the meeting is. So, and I think I sent you all a link when it went live, so, and I delivered them to your homes. You asked about, can the budget be made for visually accessible, i.e. pie chart, so families in our district can understand where the funds are being distributed and how they impact different groups of students. And so, yeah, we could provide pie charts What we can't necessarily do is tie specific expenditures to every demographic category. How will Multnomah budget cuts impact David Douglas Sun programs? So decisions are not yet finalized, but at this time, it's our understanding our sites will not be impacted. I think it's mostly our neighbor Portland Public. How is the district advocating that some programs remain in the district as they are a vital resource for student and families? And so our Communication, Family, and Community Partnerships Department regularly meets with the county representatives. I can tell you that Ken meets too, and they are always advocating for resources and keeping those programs. Did you want to add anything? Okay. How will the district make decisions about cutting resources for individual schools that are in line with the commitment to equity? And so again, we do look at those that equity lens on, will the decision align with the mission and vision, down to, how is it affecting disparities or producing unintended consequences? I will tell you those decisions are going to get harder and harder just because the reductions are going to get larger over time. So in particular reductions, you talked about 1.8 FTE in the English as a second language staffing, which is in our 1291 budget. Those teachers are actually part of our elementary program. Our elementary teachers, our classroom teachers, are divided 0.8 in our instructional 1111 elementary program and 0.2 in 1291. And the reason that we do that is because they're delivering those language services in the classroom, and they're being mentored by a language development specialist. So that's why you see that reduction. That's a corresponding 0.2 for all of those elementary FTE that we reduced. There were two items I wasn't quite sure. It talks about middle college reduction in payments, or middle college payments versus Oregon Promise. And I believe Oregon Promise is an actual grant program. Versus the middle college payments, we did reduce those. This is the second year of reductions for those. This year we're only spending $15,000, and I think the budget was somewhere around 75. So,
A follow-up question. There was some uncertainty about what the middle college is. That was something that there was maybe some clarity could be added.
yeah, so this particular program allows students to get college credit, and in particular this one goes through Mount Hood Community College. But we do have several other programs that we work with Eastern Oregon, and I'm trying to remember who else. I'm drawing a blank. To allow students to get those credits. And those will continue under grant funding. Let's see, the 9 FTE elementary versus 1 FTE at high school. So there's actually 3.5 teaching FTE at high school that are reduced, as well as 1 counselor. So I wasn't quite sure what numbers you were referring to there. And the equity TOSA, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, the equity TOSA, we currently have 2 TOSAs or FTE in that, and in meeting with our previous superintendent, assistant superintendent, we had conversations. There was an individual that was going to be leaving that department, requested to leave the department, and just through attrition, kind of the decision was made, okay, we're going to absorb that one reduction because of the reductions we're doing all through the district office. So the idea there was not to reduce our equity work, the work at the building level and what we're trying to do, but some of the supports, unfortunately, we are going to be losing as we made reductions at the district office.
Pat, with middle college, that's the program where students go to Mount Hood Community College, right? We're not eliminating Mount Hood Community College credits at the high school, like for the classes that exist, right? This is separate from the existing coursework. Yes? Jen? Principal Busher? The middle college program is separate from the Mount Hood Community College courses that are offered in the building, correct? Okay.
Yeah.
Just separate program where they go to the on-site. And we're seeing more students utilize the classes that are offered here than to go elsewhere?
So the next question was, how is the district prioritizing equitable access for students in the areas listed below? And most was related to sports and clubs. And so Most funding for sports is derived from the fees they charge in fundraising. The district does have grant support to help assist equitable access for students to participate. What is the process for allocating funding for each individual sport? So again, most of the funding comes through fees and fundraising that each sport does. You asked about ensuring equitable allocation of funding for different sports. Funding for each sport may vary greatly based on the needs of each sport. So if you think of something like football, which there's a lot of equipment that goes and safety gear that goes along with football, versus something like tennis, where maybe there's not quite as much. I don't know if you're meaning equal or equitable or how we would quite do that. You want to?
I think you said it well. The other thing, though, there's some of it's also dictated like the salaries for coaches and all that's in our license contract. So some of those fees are not changed annually, or we have a decision. It's part of the bargaining process and are currently allocated through the license contract.
So you had a question, what are the sports fees paying for? So again, it pays for staff costs, the employer costs that go along with that, fees to participate in the sport, equipment needed. You asked how the budget process can ensure that historically underrepresented students are benefiting most from fees. And I'm not sure how to address that because I don't know that the budget process in itself would be the vehicle to do that. Because usually it's the participants who pay the fees generally who benefit from it.
Yeah, and over the past we've had informal scholarship programs. The high school administration, athletic departments always said we'll never turn a student away. So the fees that come in, how they're allocated, the fees come in and they go to the program. But the reality of students that might need help and support, we've always tried to say every student's going to be involved, we'll figure it out. And the high school launched this year in partnership with our foundation, a program called No Scots Left Behind, which intentional purpose of that is the same thing, to make sure that if there's families, students, athletes that need resources and support, we're going to get that to them so they can participate. I don't know, high school or Brad, if you want to add anything related to that.
Yeah, it's going to be a huge difference for our athletes next year that can apply for a scholarship, partial scholarship. And the idea is that every kid should be eligible to participate in athletics. And right now, our athletic fees fund our entire program. And so just saying we're not going to collect this. And so working with the foundation, we've raised quite a bit of that, a pretty substantial amount. It's going to at least fund next year and part of next year. And so we're working on getting sustainable fundraising effort to do that. Yeah, it's activities and athletics. Yeah. And so we're in the process of figuring out how to apply that money, but it's a substantial amount for the first year, and the idea is this will be something we can include for 2 years and find out how to fund it. And the foundation's been awesome.
So the next question was student belonging spaces and club support. It looked like the questions focused mostly on clubs. What's the process of determining allocation of funding for individual student clubs, especially for historically underrepresented populations? So those clubs are usually funded through fundraising and grants that they do, and that's how they get funded. How can the budget process ensure equitable allocation of funding for different clubs? And I don't know that that's necessarily a budget process per se, because it is a club activity and the club process for going through and having a club. There's a whole procedure that they have at the high school. The next question is arts, music, and CTE access. What are the current funding levels? Are they being maintained? So, for example, elementary music teachers are mostly funded through the City of Portland Arts Tax, and you will see that from year to year basically be supplemented by the general fund. Now, going forward, we may have to get to a place where we don't have one FTE teacher at every elementary school, just because the enrollment there won't support it. in the arts tax, it's a one teacher to 500 students. So if you were to look at our enrollment online, and you would look at the number of schools that are less than 500 students, I think almost every single one now is less. So, you know, we'll need to make some decisions possibly in the future about, do we allocate those resources differently? Middle school, high school, arts and music, it's dependent upon the class enrollment and student enrollment. And at this time, there are not any changes to CETE, music, or arts teachers funding. And then you had a question, how is access for historically underrepresented prioritized for these programs? And we try to ensure all students have an opportunity to participate in those programs. That's one of our focuses in trying to keep those as best we can.
As far as our music department, and I can speak from that, from the high school, because this is my 26th year of working for the high school and volunteering there. And I think I told this committee this last year. If we cut our high school music program, it would be the biggest disaster in this district, because they are far out. I go to all the football games, all the basketball games, and there's some schools that are our neighbors that sound like it's a garage band.
Yeah, I absolutely. I would just weigh in that statement is accurate. We have an amazing program that I hope I know I am proud of. It's amazing, truly amazing. But I will extend that. And you're saying we should never cut at the high school. I hope we never have to. But I will also say one of the reasons, and I know if you talk to our music director and others, one of the reasons that program is where it is because of where we start music at the elementary school and the middle school, and so it's the whole program that leads that. So just the reality of hanging on to that is intentional in our budget. We're trying every single year.
The other thing with football is, and that some of the people in this room, including the people out in the audience, which are staff, but some of you up here sitting at the big table with me, we've got 2 individuals that are playing in the NFL right now that are active. And back in the day, I filmed both of them because I volunteered for the football team, and I filmed both of them, and they both play in the NFL right now. One just recently got traded to the San Francisco 49ers. And so he has a foundation, and one of our retired principals works with that foundation to get money for our program. So they don't go for him for everything, but he tries to help out quite a bit.
And I will just say, it doesn't matter if our kids were the worst at sports and the worst at music. Kids in sports and music graduate at a staggeringly high rates. It doesn't matter how good they are. They just love being part of the team that makes them come to school and it makes them graduate. So when we're looking at how do we get these kids to do better in school, get better test scores, and graduate, those programs give us more bang for our buck than anything else we spend money on. Like, the return on investment on extracurriculars is astounding. So I would never put it on. We would never ever want to cut them. There's so much more to those than just how good at sports they end up being or how good at music they are.
I sent an email, and I'm just trying to figure out if what I'm thinking is happening. It was the idea that this year we were down, like, we decreased in size, so we lose like 3.7 million or something, right? And we have to make up some stuff. So we've kind of, this year, when I first looked at it, I thought, oh, this is super nice. It actually doesn't seem like anything, like this meeting's going to be pretty easy. Compared to like last year when you're like, we're going to cut music teachers like that. That's not going to go over well. It's like, and stuff like that. And we were cutting like high school drug and alcohol counselors. We were cutting like IAs out the wazoo, right? We were cutting like all these stuff, and we didn't show that large of a drop of population, so it was pretty difficult. This year seemed easy, but if I look at it, it seems like we're saying that there's 2 million coming up next year that we kicked down the road. It seems like there's 1.5 in curriculum, so we're at like 3.5 million. There's another buses or so. We've got another I don't know how much million. And then on top of that, if we have another decrease like we did this year, we're down another like 4 million, 3 million. So we're at like 7 or 8 million. On top of that, the PERS loan we have is ending next year. And so that's going to add, I don't know, my ChatGPT would say something around $1 million. I don't know if that's right at all. But so it's like $1 million or $2 million there. So then it's like we've got all of those things happening. And then on top of that, we decreased our contingency by 1%. So now we're even tighter in our budget phrase than we were before. That's another like $1.5 million or so. And then we, on top of that, we now have cut into our initial one. We took 6 million from it this year. We've been at 23, 26. We went up a little bit in 24, 25. We're at 22. And then this year we took 6 million, which is double than what we took last year. So it's even, we've doubled that. So that's like another 6 million of, whoa, where'd that go? Right? And so that same thing happens again next year. That's another 6 million taken out of that again. And it just seems like it's kind of all piling up that when I come here next year, we're going to have a really hard conversation. Can you speak to if that sounds accurate or not?
It's snowballing, yes. It's snowballing. So you have things that where you're spending down your ending fund balance. You have increased PERS costs. We've kicked the can down the road on the Chromebook replacement. Kicked the can down the road on textbook adoptions. That one's not going to be something that we are going to be able to continue to do that because by Division 22, we have to do that after a certain, we get a waiver for, I think, 2 years. Brooke will correct me. And then, guess what? Time's up. Genie's out of the bottle. You got to do it. So that's where things are going to start catching up with us. I talked about PERS rates. Those will be increasing the next year, in the next biennium. So, I'm sorry, Chris. It's like, oh, nothing, no good news, yeah. And so what we are doing is we've been looking and getting some information on folks for enrollment forecasting because we are going to even probably start to have discussions about, do we start consolidating buildings? Do we start, we do have some rentals that we utilize. Do we start looking at pulling things back and moving it around? So those types of discussions are coming.
And I would just add to that that's absolutely accurate in worst case scenario. The worst case scenario is the worst case scenario, and we want to be very transparent with this committee and our entire community, right? Again, the reality of what we can do this year for next year for the students, we feel like we have a balanced budget that does that. Does this budget answer all those questions? No. But I will also say we've been doing this, and maybe not as drastic, right? Every year it gets a little closer because we spend down ending fund. We've been doing this. I would say I'm proud of this committee and this team over the years, not just last year, that we have reduced every year. We have as our enrollment, rather than just ignoring it, we've been taking FTE, trying to reduce, trying to be creative around our funding and how we do it. And we've, I guess, limped a little bit and even thrived in areas because of that. So the worst case scenario, yes, we could be here and we all want to be washing our hair instead of here because it'll be tough. But there could be others, right? New biennium, there could be different funding. I'm not projecting that, but they could access the emergency fund for education. We could have a tick up in enrollment. We're not projecting that either. We're trying to be very conservative around it, but we were surprised a couple years ago with a little bit of a tick. Last year, year before, we had a one-time payment around PERS dollars. Apparently, there's something like that coming again that's going to be helpful. Doesn't answer all your questions, please, but we do know that worst case scenario is worst case scenario, and we will have to be here doing what we need to do to have a balanced budget. But for now, we believe we can get by with what we're doing, still get the services to kids. And what you're saying, Zane, I just want to reflect because the individuals in the audience and many in our buildings and in the classrooms, it looks easier, but there are still over $9 million reductions in this budget. That was a lot of work for a lot of people in transition, and a lot of teachers are going to feel that, a lot of administrators, a lot of our community. So it is, although different than last year, I agree, it is still impactful. Other than that, I don't have a great answer. Obviously, if the board directs us, cut all that and do all this and don't do that, then we will have to go back to the drawing board. But based on our current communication with the board, this is the direction we're taking. Yeah, if that makes sense.
And I will say that I think our board is committed that if there's any worst case scenario situations, that you won't be hearing about it the very first time at the budget meeting, because we will be doing the necessary steps to make sure we're involving staff and community and administrators and everyone in the process to figuring out that worst case before it just becomes a bomb that explodes at a budget meeting, because no one wants that. We want to have a conversation and involve everyone to see what's best for our community.
I think
How many, oh, go ahead.
Yeah, so I'm trying to figure out, like, when we look at this budget, if there's ways we can hurt more this year so that we hurt less next year, it just seems like that might be, you know, like I like the idea that you brought up the travel. The travel went up, you know, not much. What, 100? Travel went up like $130,000, right? And so it's kind of like that's one teacher. If we were to say, let's get rid of that $130,000 upgrade, who's hurt by that?
Well, as Pat said, it's a little hard to, because it's a number of different things, but some of it's contractual, some of it's mileage. We can't just say we're not paying you mileage.
I see.
So it'd be, it's how much are people driving and moving and going throughout the district or going throughout the state for different things around travel. So part of it's not just you can cut. So who's hurt? I don't know about a who, but the overall process, there'd be less travel, right? We'd have to say no to some things, but some things we can't say no to, right? I mean, ultimately, if a staff member is required to do something that's travel and it's work. Now, if there's back to Pat, like conferences and everything and those type of things, but typically we aren't paying for conferences and that's usually grant funded type things. This is not an excuse, but I'll say this as well. What we're talking about as far as the reductions is not $100,000. It's
No, I understand.
so.
It's
And
much
again, I
larger.
don't want to be, but
Yeah.
that I just want to make sure that we realize that for
Yeah.
everybody. Yeah.
Yep. No, I understand that it's hard because there's a massive amount of money, the 150 million or whatever in general fund. But then when it comes down to the millions at the end, it does get difficult because that 130,000 is like, that's really not that much. Well, it still is one teacher.
Yeah.
That is one teacher for a year.
Which
So that's-
matters. Yeah.
Which does matter.
Yeah.
So there's that. I don't know. It's hard for me to think that the whole mindset needs to shift, or else we will just continue to go under each year more and more. Like I'm sure all of Oregon schools are hurting, is my guess.
Yeah.
Everybody's hurting. Somebody has to come out on top with a new creative way. I mean, it's just that's the way the business world works. Somebody pops out with a new idea that says, hey, we can make this work in an exceptional, interesting way. Let's try it. So there's that. But I think one of the things we need to be looking at as a school district, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, but is I think we will continue to decline. All of what I've been reading basically seems to say Oregon is expecting declines for the next 10 years.
Yes.
We will be declining by 1% every single year. And so as we look at trying to hold on to the idea that we are a big school district, every year we're wasting money by not being willing to downsize to match where we're going. If we downsize before it, or at the correct time it needs to, we don't waste any money. If we downsize too late and we run a whole year while we're still upsized too large than we should be, hoping that next year it shoots back up, we've now wasted a lot of our money. So it's things like, even like in the email I said the district office. I don't know how much we own of that building. I don't know how much of it is ours, but I do know that office buildings are easy to come by. Getting rid of an office building, we've had 2,000 less students, so there has to be room in a school somewhere. We can move everybody from an office to there. We can lease out that building, sell that building for a couple million, get our Chromebooks at least. It seems like the play is to downsize and not hope that we shoot back up in size. Is that, what do you think?
Yeah. So that would be the thing, is we would probably look at canceling some leases and moving some programming around.
Well, I mean, it absolutely, if the board told us, hey, we want to sell district office, then we would sell district office. That'd be a one-time infusion of cash, right? It doesn't really, it helps for a year or two or whatever it may be.
Well, it should
But
be,
your
it should
idea,
be both, right? It should be, I mean, because buildings have maintenances that need
Yeah,
to
there's-
ongo as curse.
there's
There's
on-
two sides of it: a fusion of cash and a few $100,000 less each year. You know, 2 or 3 teachers worth of pay would be my guess.
Well, but if I get rid of a building, that's gonna be pretty much a one-time deal, right? Other than utilities, I mean.
Yeah, utilities, security, all that upkeep, and then you move into a building who currently doesn't have anybody in it, so you're now
Yeah.
banking on the fact that you've already been upkeeping and security of that building, so that one then gets increased. I'm saying it's not going to be your $10 million shortfall, but it's just it's just the mindset of saying it seems like we're getting smaller. All data shows we're getting smaller. How do we follow that trend that says instead of saying let's get more kids to come here, the kids just don't exist. The birth
What-
rates,
The pro-
everything's going down.
The problem with that, though, is like if you're saying like, let's sell district office and we think we can get $4 million for it, that's a one-time infusion of $4 million, and you're going to continue programming with that, and then the following year, you're not having another infusion of $4 million. That exacerbates the issue, if that makes sense.
But it's
I mean, it's a one-time sense of resources, and yes, can we bring down costs? Could we lease it? Maybe, maybe not. There's a lot of stuff in our area, and one of the reasons we have leased in another area is because there's cheaper rates. And so that would be one of the things of bringing things down. But I think it's really more looking at that enrollment picture, and having that study done to give us more of a long-term picture of where do we think we're going to be, because in 2014, 15, 16, I would have sat here and told you we're going to continue to grow. And you probably heard me say that until about 16, 17, 18. And then it was like, yeah, we're not. And then we started looking at all the indicators and looking at what PSU was giving us and realizing, no, we're on a downturn and we're going to be on a downturn for a while. So.
and one of the things, Zane, that I know conceptually makes sense, but it kind of doesn't, is we're down that much enrollment. We must have wings of schools that are just open, and that's not the case, right? Our classrooms are pretty close to full. I mean, and part of the reason for that is back when our enrollment was that high, our class sizes were bursting at the seams, literally, and we've fought hard to keep our class sizes at a certain level. Again, it's an average, so some are high, but it's back then during that bubble we had, every class size was at a level that we don't think's great for kids. And to be quite honest, the needs of our students are different now. So to have class sizes at that level would be much more difficult even than when we did it then. Again, I am not trying to make excuses. I'm just trying to, the idea, if we could sell it and just go into a wing of a school, there's principals out here, I don't think too many of them will say, sure, we got a wing, and I will say, I want to give board credit to the board that they have had conversations about spaces we've leased and what if and how, and it might come to that. It literally might come to that point. We are definitely having the conversation of trying to do get a better understanding of our enrollment. So schools, do we consolidate schools, as Pat said a couple times? So that's one thing. There has been conversation from this board about district office and what if, and could we? Could you be in a classroom in this building and Tech's in a classroom in that building? If that's the direction we need to go at some point, we have had those initial conversations, I'd say, but we haven't landed there yet.
Yeah.
And we've added preschool classrooms for most of the elementaries, so that has kind of taken up space when you're thinking about a preschool has about 18 kids in a class versus a normal classroom probably has 20 to 27.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if we could.
They're not in the ADM. We count them, but so we know, but no, they're not.
If we could make it easy for us next year with the budgeting, it would be nice that this year, if the board could come up with some sort of projection plan, like, hey, if we lose 300 more students again, or something crazy, but let's say we lose 500, what do we do? So it's not like we're scrambling last minute when we get those projections. It's something like, hey, we already have kind of like an emergency plan in place saying if we don't have this much, if we don't get these, schools would have to be looking at What are we closing? What
I
are we
will
doing?
say that if you watch the board meetings, we've done that. We haven't done a consolidation plan as of yet,
Yeah.
but we had a whole workshop last year on worst case scenario 1, worst case scenario 2. Like, what are the different levels if things come in poorly? If the outcomes from the state come in lower than we thought, what are we going to do? And I do commend, because that was a lot of work and it was hard to talk about and go through, but we do that. So if we are going to go down one of those roads, we'll certainly do that. And like I said, I probably wouldn't look into getting rid of any building until we had no space that we rent from other people. Why pay for other people's rent?
Okay, I guess the question I'm
you
asking is,
know.
at what point would you think about getting rid of a building?
I think we'd have to involve a lot more people in that conversation. I don't like things when they're just the board, no offense to our board, but I want that conversation to include everyone that's sitting over there and the teachers and the community and seeing what's better for us.
Yeah, and I'm just saying if those can get done beforehand, then when we start to hit these things, instead of large arguments coming in the moment when everyone's heated, it can revert back to, hey, remember this was the plan, this is what we're doing, this is how it's going to go down.
Yeah, so depending upon what the enrollment study does and potentially a boundary study, we're looking at seeing if we can get those done by early fall. And then that way we can start having conversations in the fall to say, here's what we're seeing, here's where we're trending. Do we need to take action for the following school year, or what do we need to do? And so I'm going to guess after we get that information that there'll probably be some community meetings, et cetera, that the board will have, so.
I also want to give the board credit throughout their work and working together and budgeting from the day that this budget committee was over last year all the way through. We've been talking budget because it's not going anywhere. And one of the things we have listed property that we've held and owned, and it's currently listed a big chunk of property. So they've made some of those decisions already and pushed forward with some of those decisions. Yeah.
I want to ask another question about for preschool. We have a classroom now in every elementary school, correct? So I'm just trying to at least one. So as we look at declining enrollment, I mean, it doesn't impact middle school and high school, but is it approximately the leasing to the preschool programs? Does it offset at all what we've lost in terms of ADM in the elementary schools? Like, has that balanced out at all? I mean, it must to some point. I don't know if I'm making sense. I'm asking, as we've seen declining enrollment in elementary schools, and we've been supplementing it with preschool classes.
So, so what we've been doing is adding those preschool classes. Those at this point in time are self-funded. And so they're no longer in the general fund. When you saw a few years ago, we did have some blending and braiding with other entities. So we've been fortunate enough to be able to continue that. There have been discussions on, particular with Preschool for All, I think, and then Preschool Promise. How do they increment that funding? Preschool Promise probably would be one where we may need to eat something in the general fund, just because the amount in the grant is not keeping up with the continued increases in salaries and benefits primarily. But Preschool for All so far will cover the costs. We are waiting to see, because they've talked to us a little bit about that and impacts and looking at their funding formula. So,
because Preschool for All has higher income requirements, but you obviously can't pay separate amounts. That's part of it too.
That's part of it. And so if you remember a month or so ago, we had some discussion about the Child Development Center. And so part of the reason those costs increase is when we got Preschool for All in their levy, they required a certain percentage above minimum wage, and you had to rate and make sure that your jobs started at that. And so at the same time, we did a compensation and pay equity study for our classified, and really the jobs came in equivalent. And so depending upon what grant it is, you may not be getting the same amount of funding, which then in turn, you still are paying the same amount to similar employees.
Right. And then just one detail, the travel fund that we were talking about earlier, does that include mileage for MECP providers?
Not in general fund, so
Okay.
they're backing the
Oh,
grants.
okay.
Yeah.
Got it, thank you.
But like the board conference fees, board travel is included in that.
I had questions around the investment in early childhood education as well, and so you were speaking to it right now. So the Preschool for All, the Multnomah County program, I was wondering how you were using that, like getting funding from it for
Correct. So
preschools
we
in the
get
district?
preschool for all funding for preschool classrooms in the district. And so I would say probably a great majority. I think we have 5 funded through Preschool Promise and the rest funded through Preschool for All, other than the Child Development Center. And we are actually flipping 5 classrooms over from Preschool Promise to Preschool for All next year, and adding 2 additional classrooms in Preschool for All. And then the goal would be not next year, the following year, is to add a 3-year-old program over at North Powhurst. So that would again be funded by Preschool for All.
Does that help overall with the budget scenario, getting more preschools? Does it help like offset your administrative salaries or operational costs, or is it strictly just there's this bubble of preschool and money can only go to preschool?
There's some administrative fees that we can charge. So the grants, generally you hear about an indirect charge. That's for overhead that we can charge to those grants. So that does help, because the indirect goes into the general fund to help offset.
I have a question about technology and the Chromebooks in general, and then Chromebooks, and then technology that is used for communication and speech pathology. So this is just more like of navigating this book. I see on 4.63, so speech pathology and audiology services, there's $1,000 allocated for the computer hardware. Then for on page 4.71 for educational media services, there's $1,000 allocated for hardware. And then I'm curious, technology services on 4.121, we have 168,000 for computer hardware. Is that technically for our staff, for their computers, or is that for the Chromebooks in general? Like, I'm just curious where we allocate the funds to maintain the Chromebooks, if they break, or, you know, if they're damaged, how much we're allocating to maintain those.
Yeah, so normally the Chromebooks would be under the 2660 technology services. And so you saw a little bit of a realignment for this upcoming year into computer hardware. So that is to help with some of the replacements, things that get damaged, things that get lost, not
So
returned.
that's student facing.
Student facing and adult facing. So
Okay.
when we have, normally the computer fleet itself would be, and the replacement plan would be in this budget. Other than MECP, I will tell you that caveat. They buy their own things. When you're looking more at communication devices, you're going to look at 2150. Sometimes we get things under 2160, and then sometimes through grant services, grant programming. And then was there another one that you asked about?
No, those are the 3. And I am asking, as I said on the liaison for the foundation, and we had some requests for MacBook communication devices. And so I just wanted to be able to respond to them. Like, if the opportunities to say, hey, we actually do need some padding in this budget, or just to help answer that a little bit better. But thanks, Pat. I appreciate it.
is there good news in the pension offset bond payments going away at some point? I know that's going to offset, but is it's a little, I'm just trying to grasp like a nice
You want
shining
one
moment.
positive-
Like, is there a
Positive thing to hold on
is there
to
a
tonight?
positive thing in being out of the debt service of the pension offset bond in what, next year?
Yeah, so if you were to look at page 8.5, you'll see fiscal year 27, 28. Those are our last payments. And that's actually, you're going to see that that last payment is about half of what we normally would see. So that will be some reprieve. The issue with that is 27, 28 is going to be the start of a new biennium. That's going to be a new PERS rate. And remember, I said the advisory is at 29.34 right now. So it kind of depends.
So you're saying it's a positive?
So I'm saying you won't have a bond payment anymore. Yeah. It'll come to you in a different way.
Also, on the Chromebooks, why are they a priority in that for that amount of money? Like, or is there creative thinking, or is it now the expectation that every student needs a Chromebook, or it's just like a nice to have?
Yeah, I think that's a deeper conversation that we're going to be engaging in, kind of. And I don't know if you mean specifically Chromebook versus a different brand, or if you're talking technology. Yeah, the technology piece, we do have a lot of our online, or our curriculum is online based. So we've gone that direction now. So to access the curriculum, we need some sort of tool, but that could still be a conversation that we have. We're having conversations about whether we're one-to-one as in checkout or one-to-one no they stay, because we have a lot of Chromebooks that checked out and never come back, kind of a thing. So we're looking at different processes as well to help limit that cost and need. But in general, there is a conversation about, I think I will tell you my understanding of screen time is troublesome. And then students come to school and their screen time. And I think that's something that we're going to have to talk about, or should talk about, as a board, as a school district, as a community, as a society. But that's, now I'm getting off the budget topic and more a reality. But we have made some decisions right now where we need technology to access the curriculum. So we'd have to, how do we shift away from that? What does that look like?
Yeah.
There's school districts that have gotten rid of it in their schools.
And I think the hard thing is, as you're looking forward and you're thinking about, like, a textbook adoption is supposed to be for 7 years. So if you delay that and you have an online subscription, you've probably purchased that for 7 years, you're going to run into a problem if you decide to delay and apply for that waiver. Whereas a textbook, I can just pull the textbook out. It's, got yellow highlighter and scribbles in it, but at the same time, I still have a book. I don't get, boop, the software shut off.
Thank you. Similar buses. What makes a bus end of life?
That's a good question. So buses, when we get that 70% reimbursement, that's based on a 10-year life cycle as far as the state is concerned. So once the bus hits its 10th year of depreciation, it no longer gets any other funding for that bus. For us, what makes it defunct, if you would remember, I think the last year I've brought a pretty long list of things that we had kind of a graveyard that we would go and pull things off of. And when we did all the work at South Powellhurst, we needed to clear that out and get rid of some buses. But they are getting harder as they age. So when they're 20 years old, I'll tell you, this isn't related to a bus, but we had a van that's over 20 years old, and I'm trying to find parts on eBay, which is ridiculous.
Call me up. I love a good pick and pull trip.
I had a question related to the Chromebooks, and is there someone, probably not, fundraising or grants for tech donations? Because, long ago, Chromebooks came out, and Google was like, take them, wow. And now Google's saying, pay us money. And is there someone out there willing to reach out to Google and say, give me the books because you have billions of dollars?
We definitely have our grant
Yeah.
writer who is always looking for
great.
opportunities for things. We haven't seen anything recently pop up like that, but I think, it's kind of like Apple. They really wanted you to get the product first, and now
Yeah.
everybody wants their product, and so now it's like, oh, that's the only product we want. So
Yeah. I did a quick search, and there are some programs offering laptops for schools. I would need to know more about the success rate of those programs, but it's out there. Could be helpful. And then I was wondering, I would love to, I don't know if this is a entirely separate meeting, because I would love to know more about the reimbursement rate, or what this calculation ADMR actually equates to. Like, how much money is one ADMR? And who, if anyone, is advocating in the state, to raise that? Because in my work, there's advocacy around like Medicaid rates and how that doesn't pay enough. So
I think this is one of the areas, sorry, did you want to? One of the areas why you're seeing such contention at the legislative level. So you're hearing about huge declines in the numbers of students statewide. So if you go back to Ken's message in that chart, you can see from 2016-17, the average, the general purpose grant was $7,223. And so that's between the green and the red at the bottom of the chart. And you'll see it now, it's 11,707 per ADM. So it's gone up pretty significantly. A lot of that is due to the fact that there's fewer students in the pool. And so think of it as Thanksgiving dinner. You bring a pie. Lots of people show up, people get little slices. Fewer people show up, you get a little bigger slice per individual. So that's where the state's trying to determine where exactly are the constraints coming from in school districts. Why are we seeing such, because this past biennium was the largest increase. It was $1 billion. That we've seen in a long, long time. And they're like, why are you still screaming for money? Part of it's PERS, part of it's wage and labor demands, part of it's student needs, like special education. When you hear about the pool for high-cost disability being $55 million, and everybody statewide is submitting their claims, and they're over $200 million, there's a big discrepancy there. So... But yeah, that's legislative.
I guess for general purpose grant per ADMW, is that the row I'm looking at? Or would I be looking at just the ADMW row?
That's what you would look at, is that 7223 or that 11707 per ADM.
Okay.
And we could definitely do a workshop or do more on that.
There's a whole worksheet through
Well,
ODE.
I guess I'm curious if it is. So in my brain, I'm thinking Medicaid rates, and Medicaid pays a certain amount, and it's like maybe 40% of what the actual care costs. So if I'm looking at 11,000 per student, that's not the true cost per student, right? Do we know, like...
Correct. That's not the true cost per student.
Is that like 50% per student cost?
It's really going to depend upon the student and their needs. And so like special education, like we said before, to get into the high-cost disability grant, students have to cost the district $30,000 or more. So think about that. If I'm getting $11,707 for the first weight, that's just for having a student, then I'm spending 2 additional weights.
Yeah.
They're going to give me 1, because they'll give you up to 2 per student. So they're going to give me another 1 for special ed. So basically that's $23,000. So there's still a gap of $7,000 to get to $30,000
Yeah.
that they're saying, district, that's on you. Then at $30,000, they're counting all the expenses above that. But again, the pool's 55 million
Yeah.
for over 200. So you're getting 22 cents on the dollar
Yeah.
for everything you're spending.
And I want to reinforce the PERS rates and what's happening. If you think about our general fund and you think about 80%, it's actually 82% of that is salaries. So 82% of that general fund, 150 million, well, 25 to 28% of that right off the top goes to PERS. Gone. We aren't spending it. In other words, in many districts, in fact, we're one of the, I think there's only 4 states in the nation that PERS comes out of the state school fund. Most states actually, the state school fund is school funding, and then PERS is outside of that, different than that. So, I mean, there's lots, I believe, lots of issues. There's lots of problems. There's lots of decisions legislators are going to have to make. But I will argue that it's less a spending problem and more of a revenue problem. And again, we can have a long side conversation about that.
Yeah.
That's not to say there's not areas where we can get better. There's no doubt in the budget there's areas. But the reality of the gaps we're seeing, I truly believe, I've said it in many of my messages, our kids deserve better, period. And the question about who's advocating, there's many at this table that are taking opportunities to do that. I do. I sit on different groups and have visited Salem and legislators and emails and calls and all of that. The one hope, back to hope, good news, is this is the first time that I've heard in my years of doing this where people were talking that talk in the legislature, right? In the halls, they were saying, hey, this isn't good enough, and this funding is wrong, and we have to fix it, and we have to look at a lot of systemic issues. Now, whether there'll be political will to do that and how long that will take, but at least they were willing to recognize and talk about it, which every other year I've been doing this the last 10 years, they haven't even wanted to talk about that.
Yeah.
There was a bill in the short session to change the formula and how it's done, but short session, I don't think any of the groups felt was long enough to figure that out, so no one backed it and it died. But the thought is that it's going to come back. All those groups that opposed it are working, and there's groups working just on how to better. If you look at the QEM even, that we hear about all the time, it's so outdated. People are like, who decided you need this many this? We don't need that. Like, it's outdated, so it does need to get looked at, and I think there is appetite to do that. So we just need to continue advocating for that, because if not, they might stop. So let's keep telling them to do it, you know.
And I had another question around tuition to other Oregon districts, and I believe you said that might include deaf and hard of hearing, correct? Because we don't
Correct.
have we as a district ever had a deaf and hard of hearing program?
In district?
Yeah.
Not to my knowledge.
Yeah.
And
no.
that's,
Okay.
I'm going to guess that's probably because of the population is so low. That's a hard program to stand up. And I'm just speaking from my experience. I worked in Salem Kaiser, and they had elementary, middle, high programming, finding sign language interpreters, getting that all scheduled, having, you know, the matriculation through the different grade levels. That's difficult to do.
Yeah.
So, and for a few students.
Thank you.
I have a question. I saw property services spread out everywhere. Is there a place where we could see the cost of building, what we lease out for that we don't own? Is there a place in here that, or you could just get that to me another time?
Yeah, that would be difficult because it's going to probably be under 320 property
It's
services.
320. I saw that, but
Yeah.
it's spread
And
out.
there's a
through
lot of
all the
things,
different-
yeah, there's a
yes.
lot of things that go into 320, and so heating, electricity, garbage, all
Yeah.
sorts of services like that. So, but we can get that separate for you.
So one of the difficult things about the budget, there's many things, is that sometimes in the complexity, we miss some of the details, or we're kind of overwhelmed by all the bad or the whatever moving pieces. Last year, I belatedly missed one of the impacts on our dual language immersion program. And so we lost one of our kind of lead coordinators through reductions in TOSAs or moving around, right? I just wondered if we could have kind of pulse check on how these reductions have impacted the dual language program. We're going into our 5th grade year and we're looking ahead for 6th grade. So have there been any impacts, or do we feel like that's been handled through this process?
Yeah, I don't believe there's any direct as far as staffing. We've kind of gone through that process through HR. So right now, we're solid, and we believe back to that kind of reduction in force and change, we aren't going to see anything there, but we aren't certain about other reductions through grants. I mean, there could be more coming. This is a point in time tonight, but I'm pretty confident that we don't see any reductions there. Yeah.
Okay.
And we're continuing to add, and I know our middle school, where we're planning to put 6th grade as we transition, is advocating already for that and kind of what that's going to look like. So we're trying to plan forward around it. Yeah.
Okay.
Shane, is some of that coaching being done by the Grow Your Own?
Okay, great, thank you.
And looking at the budget, I think there's a discussion of cutting guidance counselors, but there's also some kind of budgetary magic going on. So I just want to make sure I understand.
The budgetary magic.
Yeah, there's a shift of counselors from one bucket to, I think it's Title I maybe, but I want to make sure I understand what that is, because I'm not sure I do.
So this is where the Jenga, and you put the piece, you take the piece out, and then you put the piece back, and then the piece goes somewhere else. And so let me see here. We had school achievement specialists previously in the general fund. We did that as a reduction and put them in the early literacy and Title I grant for this year, thinking we were getting more for early literacy, which did not happen. That did not come to fruition with the legislature. We did have carryover in Title I, so we were able to sustain those positions. School behavior specialists went out of Title I into general fund. So that was kind of the wish-wash. Then as we were looking at reductions, we knew that anything going into Title I was going to probably need some reduction in the following year, just because carryover isn't intended to do programming every year. So what ended up happening was we did reduce the school achievement specialist positions, or student achievement specialists, and then we moved the school behavior specialist. Did I have that right? You get the SBS and the SAS, and I'm really trying not to use the acronyms. And we moved those over to title funding. So again, depending on where title funding ends up in the next, in the following year, after next year, we may be coming back and saying that's a reduction, or we may be able to hold on to that. So, does that help understand?
A bit. In terms of actual warm bodies, what's it, because I assume there's a nutrition element to this as well, or is there not?
There's what?
Yeah, so ultimately, just to kind of summarize, is we made the unfortunate decision that we did eliminate student achievement specialists from our elementary school. Every elementary school had one student achievement specialist. Pat talked about, shifting and doing all, but ultimately that was the impact, that one student achievement specialist was reduced from every elementary school. Now the question is, okay, attrition, yes. So those, when we go through the process of the reduction in force, as we look at licensure, we look at seniority, and we start doing the placement. I'm oversimplifying, but right now we have placement for those 9 student achievement specialists in different type of positions throughout the district, if that's what you're asking. So we no longer have student achievement specialists, but those individuals do have positions, if that's what you're asking.
Sorry. So in the elementary school, in losing those student achievement specialists, how does that impact the average student? Just so I can understand that.
Yeah, so it impacts in a lot of ways, but one of the conversations we have is the administration team is going to be taken on. So student achievement specialists, a lot of focus on basically looking at achievement. I mean, it's in the name, right? So the reality is what they did. We're currently in the process of how is that going to be covered. And one of the areas is with the administrative team. The other is looking at throughout the actual staffing in general. Again, back to that plate. How do we do it differently? We're going to have to do it differently, but we're trying to keep the core of what they did alive, but it is going to be different. It's going to be less, and it's going to be different. I also want to make sure you heard Chris, because you asked about that and where the funding is. There was also reduction of 1 FTE counselor, high school counselor, at the high school level. So just to make sure, I don't know if that's what you're asking or not, but you talked about the counseling budget, so I wanted to be clear there, not overlook that.
I just have one more question. Talking a little bit about technology services, reduction of 1 FTE and 1 FTE licensed TOSA. What is the impact on students and or the technology program? Or how is that impacting schools in general?
So the technology TOSA was part of the Ed Tech committee, and so we're looking at how to redistribute some of those duties. The individual did leave the district, and so there wasn't necessarily a reduction in force. There was simply through attrition. But that person did do a lot with educational technology and also data privacy agreements, which also my department worked with. So Brooke and I have been in conversation about who's on first regarding that. Because that's our favorite topic is data privacy agreements, let me tell you. The attorneys make a lot of money off of those. But as far as the supervisor, I believe that we're looking at how do we reallocate those duties. Ken?
It's the same. It's the same answer. Unfortunately, the reality is with the technology department, kind of look at if that position's gone, what are the major roles and responsibilities of that position? How are we absorbing them throughout the department? So that one's more department. The other one is at school level. And I wanted to pause, if you don't mind, and because we ask our administrators and team to come support and to be here, and I did a poor job of answering your question around SASSA. So I just want to turn back to Brooke, and I know Lisa's in the audience too, and just give them an audience or anything you'd add, or I know you can say it a lot better than I did, either one of you, to Chris's question about SASSAs are gone. What are we going to do? Thanks, Brooke.
I just wanted to kind of keep up on the time. It's about 9 o'clock, and I want to maybe take a pulse check and see what questions are out there or things that need to be resolved for passing the budget. Are there hard stops? We also know that the budget then goes to the board, and the board has to approve it in June at their meeting too. So I guess I'll just kind of do a quick pulse check and see where we are.
One of the things I've always appreciated about this process, and I think I'm on year 7 maybe now. I have no idea. I've been doing this for too long. There's always a bit of an internal tension in these meetings about the role of the budget committee. Sometimes you hear kind of, we want to look closely at line by line, item by item, and make our own specific recommendations as a committee, which I don't believe is really our role. I think our role is to pressure test things, to ask important questions. I think part of the reason you have the board in this committee along with members of the public is because the board takes the discussion that we had here and carries it over into their further conversations. And so I know that there are probably people, and I think I'm probably one of them, who are troubled by elements of what's in this budget, and we've asked questions around those things. And the benefit of those questions is that, I know we're on YouTube, so the community's heard those questions asked and answered. Members of the school educational community have heard those questions asked and answered, and the board has heard those questions asked and answered, and we'll be able to carry some of those things forth. So I just want to say I think everyone should ask whatever questions they have, but I also hope that none of us are planning on starting to change budget line items because, again, I don't think that's the role of this committee.
I think my last question, it should be pretty light. And I'm going to preface this with my day job. I did not get a COLA, or my employee group didn't get a COLA adjustment this last opportunity. What's the reasoning in baking into the budget the COLA adjustments for the employee groups, given that they're the largest slice of that pie? If that made sense.
So we do have a negotiated agreement with our classified, and so that is, I believe, 4% for next year, so that's been baked in. We do not have negotiated agreements with 3 of our groups licensed, our managers and our administrators. That's baked in at 2%. So at this point, we felt that that was probably what we could afford in the budget and put that in accordingly. We could do 0, but most likely folks settle for something. The last time we did 0 was probably over 10 years ago, negotiating with all the groups.
Can you, when you say afford in the budget, that it just sounds weird in my head?
That sounds weird, doesn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, it's like your
versus-
deficit spending and you're saying you can afford 2%.
Yeah.
It's, you want to answer that, Ken?
Well, I think it comes back to the conversation we have with the board, right? The idea is what can we afford or not? And based on this budget, there's a lot of things that we probably can't afford, deficit spending, but we do believe that our educators, one, deserve a raise, deserve context, and the board, I think, came together and tried to figure out, hey, we want to come to the table with something. I mean, if you looked at the actual budget and where we're at, probably the truly most fiscal prudent thing to do would be zeros, but I don't think our board, and I don't want to speak for the board, but based on the conversations, felt that that was where they wanted to start. They wanted to start with something, with the understanding that that does cause our entire budget, that we have to navigate around that. So that was the assumption, we call them assumptions. That assumption being made was that 2%.
Can you tell me what that equals? If we went from, if you were at 0 on each of them versus doing the 4-2-2, are we talking like a lot of millions, or are we talking like not, like how?
Off the top of my head, I think it was $1.5 million or so. Yeah. $1.5 million or so.
It's not insignificant. And my question is mostly for the YouTube audience, of the 3 people watching.
It's
'Cause
a
I
difficult.
want the public to be able to go, oh, we actually talked about this, versus I can't believe they're in deficit spending
Spending
and they
and then
still baked
giving a
in
COLA.
for those administrators for themselves. So I just,
Yeah.
And also, just to note, we are in the middle of bargaining, and we have already proposed 2% for next year, so we can't go backwards and say, just kidding, 0. So 2 is the lowest it can be. anything higher that it ends up being after bargaining will affect the budget accordingly.
Is there something in the contract currently about COLA freezes based on deficit budgets or
No.
asteroids hitting the Earth? Okay, great.
I think, it feels like our job, I could be wrong, this may not be our job at all, but is you have this ridiculous system, first of all, with PERS taking like $25 million more than a corporation's retirement fund would take from this sort of level of employment. So you're losing like $25 million right there. You always have these negotiations that are in play and you're not sure how they're going to work, and it may screw up the entire school year for kids because people might strike and stuff. So you've got a lot going on. So it's super, super difficult. So, I feel like making it slightly simpler each year, or like leveling out that blow, seems to be kind of something that is important then, because it's, hopefully, the state will change its funding or somewhere, but right now the projection is you can't do that. It is this. And so we just kind of, in my opinion, we want to make sure there's not one year where it's just like, oh my goodness, what are we doing? And so in leveling that out, like, this sounds terrible, but I would love to see what, trying to take off another $6 million, what that looks like. Like, just in terms of, like, not that we would vote on it, but in terms of, like, what does that impact? How does it look? Because if we could take off $6 million this year, that's $6 million less we have to take off next year. Am I wrong in thinking that this next year is actually a fairly substantial drop compared to any we've seen in previous history? It is going to be a lot bigger than we've had in the past, correct? Or am I just...
It'll be large, yes.
Yeah.
And so that would probably mean another 60 to 70 staff that we would have to cut, and we would have to give notice, and that would be RIF. That would be a reduction in force.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, we have done some of those scenarios before. The problem is that even with the current cuts, there are points that even the current cuts that we're looking at now were way worse. And then certain things came in better. And so we can't, the hard part about just doing that to make things better, what if they do get better and then we cut all these people? So it's a very difficult balancing act, and I appreciate having gone through some of those scenarios as a board, and I appreciate all the work you've all done and all the work you all do, because the budget affects you all so much, and thank you for being here, for sure.
I think I hear what you're saying, and for me, as a parent, having a student in the district who benefits from a lot of what everybody here does, it scares me a little bit to think about a lot of the things that benefit the kids of the district being cut in preparation for something that may or may not happen. In a business world, that kind of makes sense. In this scenario, I would rather go sit at the Senate, the state Senate, and the representatives, and sit at their doorsteps and ask them why we're having to make these decisions. I would rather advocate in that manner than make really harsh decisions and cuts now that could or could not have to be made next year, where there could be a whole year of benefits spread for the students over the next 12 months rather than reduction over the next 24 months, let's say. That's where I think I stand. I hear what you're saying, and yes, I don't want to have to come back here next year and have to make those decisions. So what do we need to do between now and then so that we don't have to do that?
And I will say there's glimmer of hopes with things like that. For instance, there's been a lot of attention very recently about how in Oregon we equalize funding, which makes things equal, which is not equitable to poor school districts like ours. We're having to spend a lot more of our money on certain high need things that other districts that are getting the same amount don't have to. They tend to be more affluent, less diverse districts as well. So there's conversations happening around that. So if that changes, that could affect us in a way that we have no idea what it's going to look like. So just laying that out there, that it's not just blind hope that things are going to be better. There are things that give you a glimmer that may be.
Yeah, just the strategy of one, either we can force their hand because things got so terrible, whereas if we don't make it so terrible, it's hard for them to be like, well, you don't really need it. Look, you made that little cut there, that little cut there. Whereas if we, whatever, then it'll be like, hey, we really need the money. And then that'll pressure the talks you're talking about to become more in the forefront. Like you've said, they are more in the forefront now than they were in the past, which makes sense.
I understand that, but I will tell you that I'm a little resistant to it, because in that scenario, it puts students as pawns. I understand what you're saying. I think we can demonstrate our budget is real. I think we can demonstrate that the cuts are real, and I think we can demonstrate it's coming, versus making cuts to show them. My worry about that is now, ultimately, here's kind of what's said, and again, I'm not saying it's right. I'm just saying our philosophy. We have a balanced budget that limited the impacts to services to kids. There are real services that are hurt. I hope you all felt that and you can see that. There's no doubt. And I want to take this opportunity to apologize to every one of you and to our community. I wish we weren't in this situation. It's, I do not believe, look, the books are open. Anything to do with budgetary mismanagement, it's revenue coming in, it's declining in enrollments, it's all those things we talked about. But the philosophy we kind of built this on is we have a balanced budget. Now, you are pointing out, which I hope I was transparent about and always will be, it's a little bit of smoke and mirrors, because the reality is we're deficit spending, and that can and will, let's say will catch up to us. But we've actually been saying that for a number of years, and each year it's kind of like, okay, and for that year, next year, the kids get the services in this budget. As Pat said, if we cut another $6 million, which we probably should, right, to get balance, that's probably 60 more people that are a reduction in force that's going to change the whole system, and how student-facing educators, classified administrators, it will impact everyone. So that's the argument. I don't know if it's an argument.
I'm not
saying a question. How do you?
I wasn't saying to cut to force that. I was saying that eventually we will come to that point naturally by not saving this year. Next year it will get worse and worse, and eventually it will just naturally come.
I apologize. I misheard you. Yeah. I agree. You're right. If worst case scenario, it will be next year. If it's next biennium, we get a little bit of reprieve somehow, or we get something that comes through the legislator that holds us afloat a little bit. Could be a couple years. I don't know, but your predictions and reading what this says, it very well could be next year. There's no doubt about it. Yeah.
I have two questions. One is just a technical one from earlier, so I understand. For the 1,700 extracurricular activities, what does that fund, and how is it distributed through the district?
So we're
This is on
you're
4.2.
looking at the general fund resources.
Yes,
so that
4.2.
goes into the general fund, primarily funding, again, extracurricular activities. So you can see 1132. You can see here extracurricular, we get around $170,000 a year. And if you look at 1132, which is on 4.18, the cost of extracurricular is almost 1.3 million.
But when we're saying extracurricular, what are we meaning? Because earlier with my other questions, you said that mostly those, like those clubs and activities and sports, the fees raise their own, they raise their own money and they fundraise, et cetera. So I'm
Right,
curious.
so this
what does
is
that
like
cover?
the athletic director, this is stipends for coaches. We have, what's the athletic trainer in here. We have fees so that they can pay for the sports, so they can play, because oftentimes there's a fee associated when we go to a game.
And then how is it distributed amongst the different schools in the district?
So this is high school only.
High school only?
Right. So middle and elementary are not funded through the general fund. They are funded through the SIA grant.
Okay, thank you. And then my other question is, if we do receive, unexpected, like incoming in a positive direction, is there a list of like how you prioritize what may be added in, or is that put into savings, or how does it work if we get some, increases or more grants awarded to us, for example?
So it really depends on where we're at in the year. So we go through a budget process. Principals are notified usually to do a request list, and they do that by January 31st. Cabinet also does that. Cabinet vets the list and goes through it. For the past number of years, we really look at the list to determine, is there something that's absolutely critical, or is it a lot? They do need to rate it, like need, want, nice to have. And so we really have been, trying to do what's actually critical versus, I'd really like new playground equipment or whatnot. Is it working? Yes. Does it need another coat of paint? Probably. Do we have a budget for that? Maybe or maybe not.
And a little bit, I agree with all that, but a little bit, I know we all want to think, if we get money back, what do we add back and how do we prioritize? Unfortunately, this is deficit. So if we got more money, it would probably, the recommendation would be that it helps with that deficit, right? It helps with that deficit so it's not as big. And again, that'd be up to the board to decide. But if we got more than we expected, more than likely we'd be saying, okay, well, we're going to help with this deficit and/or the contingencies at 4%. That's lower than I know the board really wants. So I think those would be conversations. Now it depends. If it's enough money we could invest, then we talk about that. I don't think any of us has that on our vision. If we got more money coming in, it'd be just more money that helps with ending fund and helps kind of with the deficit.
Two things. One, I want to thank Pat and her staff for getting this budget to us very early. This is my second 6-year term, and this is the first time I remember getting the budget before the Friday of the meeting. Second thing is, I think we need to vote whether to extend this meeting because 90% of the people out there, it's way past their bedtime. Right, Andy?
Thanks for the lead-in. I am wondering, do we have a appetite to go ahead and vote on the budget? I say we just go around and do a vote, and that will determine whether we need another meeting or not. Does that sound about right? Would someone like to motion?
I move to vote on whether we're ready to vote on the budget.
Oh, do I need to read the motion? No? Oh, not yet, sorry.
I'll second.
Okay, thanks.
I'll second the motion. I second.
Yes, go ahead.
Kamari Jerson, aye.
Carrie Fry, aye.
Heather Franklin, aye.
Joy Schomer, aye.
Stevenson, aye.
Ewald abstain.
Jordan, aye.
Whittle, aye. Epstein, aye.
Pekarsky, aye.
Solbjort, aye.
Ender, aye.
Zion, aye.
Yes, oh, sorry, now I need to read it. I move that the David Douglas School District 40 Budget Committee approve the total budget in the aggregate amount of $350,508,435. I move that the David Douglas School District 40 Budget Committee approve the district's permanent tax rate of 4.6394 per $1,000 of assessed value is to be assessed in the support of the general fund. A debt service levy in the amount of $10,197,728 is also authorized to service the district's general obligation bonds and is accounted for outside the general fund. Do I need to read the rest?
Piekarski, second.
Okay. Oh, and then the budget committee, is this budget committee only, or?
So after this motion, then go around and vote again, and then you'll read.
Okay, and is it just the budget, or is it everybody? Everybody? Okay.
Commissioner Richardson, aye.
Fry, aye.
Franklin, aye.
Shower eye.
Stevenson, aye.
Ewald abstain.
Jordan, I.
Whittle, aye. Epstein, aye.
Piekarski, aye.
Solbier, aye.
Ender, aye.
Zion, I.
And now I read the.
Property taxes.
Section here. Or is that just for us? I read this and this.
Yeah, I think this is fine. Did we say this when we motioned the first time?
No, I motioned both of them together.
Okay. Okay, then I think we're good.
Do you want me to do it separate? I can do that. Okay. All right. Thank you.
She has to sign.
I just have to sign it. Okay. I can do that afterwards. I didn't do it now. Okay, so we've done that. All right, so the next item on the agenda is that there is an announcement of a budget hearing, which is Thursday, June 11th, 2026 at 7 p.m. And with that, the meeting is adjourned.